Well, I call myself a child of the Cold War. My parents were career Air Force officers. My mom was a nurse. My dad was in aircraft maintenance. Spent 26 years serving our country, much of it overseas. I went to high school in four different places, or three, I'm sorry, three different places: Hawaii, Turkey, and Germany. I graduated from Kaiserslautern American High School in 1979, enlisted in the U.S. Army so I could go off and kill communists. Um, Went to college, majored in Russian history, got commissioned in the United States Marine Corps, became an intelligence officer. And in 1988, I was assigned to what's called the On-Site Inspection Agency, a Department of Defense activity created to implement the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was signed in December of 1987 by Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. This eliminated intermediate and short range nuclear missiles. It's the first ever treaty to get rid of nuclear weapons. And I was the first inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union to do it. That's my claim to fame. I did that for 2 years, and then went back to the Marine Corps.
As a UN inspector for 2 years?
No, this is American.
Okay.
As a Marine Corps officer serving in the Department of Defense activity. I went back to the Marine Corps, and right in time for Saddam Hussein to invade Iraq.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up on General Norman Schwarzkopf's staff as an intelligence officer. Because of my experience with missiles, I got involved in the Counter Scud campaign. I worked with Special Forces, American Delta Force, SEALs, British SAS, and others to try and interdict Iraqi Scud missiles before they could be fired against Israel or the Persian Gulf countries. The war ended. I had what they call a good war, meaning I didn't get killed and had a good reputation. But my time in the Marine Corps was over. I joined to kill communists. When I said that the first time, I wasn't joking. I joined because the evil empire was there, and I wanted to close with and destroy the communist enemy through firepower and maneuver. The Cold War ended. Soviet Union collapsed. It was over. So I left the Marine Corps only to get the phone call in August from the United Nations saying, not so, that line from The Godfather, every time I want to leave, they just reach in and they drag me back. And that's what happened. They called up and they said, nah, not so fast. We need you to come to the United Nations, set up an intelligence unit there to do to find where Iraq is hiding weapons and to get inspection teams on target. And I did that job for 7 years. I was
so you were involved in finding the weapons of mass destruction?
Well, except that in the beginning they were weapons of mass destruction. I mean, what people don't realize is Iraq was overflowing with weapons of mass destruction. And when the war ended, they were obligated to declare the totality of their weapons of mass destruction to the United Nations, and weapons inspection teams would go in, verify the accuracy of the declaration, then oversee the destruction. The original teams were composed of honest-to-goodness experts, chemical weapons experts, biological weapons experts, nuclear missile guys. I'm none of that. I'm just a simple Marine. But the Iraqis lied. They declared less than half of their chemical weapons capability. They declared less than half of their missiles. They denied having a biological capability or a nuclear capability. And so we're in a quandary. What do you do? So that's where I came in. I created an intelligence unit whose job was to find the hidden stuff. I worked with all the intelligence agencies in the world, the CIA, British MI6, Israeli Mossad, you name it, I worked with them. And then I helped gather that intelligence and turn it into what we call, it's actionable intelligence. Now, where on the ground we're going to go. And then I would lead the inspection teams into Iraq to find this stuff. And that's how we got rid of them. It wasn't that the Iraqis never had them. It's that people like me and the inspectors I worked with did a damn good job in hunting them down and disposing of them.
So Iraq actually did have weapons then?
Absolutely.
Contrary to popular belief. Because they always say, we invaded for no reason. They didn't have any weapons of mass destruction.
Well, they didn't have them when we invaded. That's what I'm trying to say, is that we, the inspectors, we got rid of them. We compelled the Iraqis to destroy them. We investigated.
Prior to us going in there.
The problem was, and this is the kicker. I thought that my job was to get rid of weapons of mass destruction, because that's what the United Nations resolution said our job was to do. I didn't realize that my government wanted something different. They wanted Saddam Hussein gone, and that they were using the inspectors not to get rid of the weapons, but to put pressure on Saddam to collect intelligence on Saddam so that Saddam could be assassinated or driven out of power. And so while I was a weapons inspector, I was actually fighting a war on two fronts. I would lead inspection teams into Iraq, and find evidence that they are being disarmed, then I would come back to the United States and have to go to war against the CIA, who were saying, no, we don't want this. To give you an example.
You were literally caught right in the middle.
Right in the middle, ping pong. So when, to give you an example, I did a series of inspections to uncover Iraq's ballistic missiles. And I succeeded. We found them. The Iraqis had to give them up. We disposed of them. And I went back and I briefed the director of the CIA. I said, they're all gone. And he said, well, no, we have some intelligence that they're hiding some underground. I was like, well, that's funny because we've accounted for them all. He said, no, they're underground. So I had to do another inspection. This one I called his bluff. I said, well, if they're underground, I'm going to need ground penetrating radar. He said, okay. And I said, it's going to have to be airborne because we have to get there fast before the Iraqis respond. He said, okay. So $12.5 million later, we got ground penetrating radar made especially for us, mounted on helicopters that I took into Iraq to look for the buried missiles, which didn't exist. So now we come back and we report again to the CIA and say, they're all gone. They're finished. The CIA came back and said, yeah, nice try. But our number now is that they have between 12 and 20. And that number will never change, no matter what you do.
Wow.
And that number didn't change. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, the CIA was still claiming that they had 12 and 20. Now, here's the deal.
Wow.
Not only that, but for instance, we weren't just looking for the weapons, but we were also trying to find out what happened to the weapons because the Iraqis destroyed a lot of weapons, blew them up, and we were trying to forensically reconstruct this. So I'm on a document search, et cetera. I need to investigate presidential security of Saddam Hussein because they were involved in this. And I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to their headquarters. We're talking showing up and getting guns put in our face.
Of course.
And we're like, no, we're not backing down. We're going to do this. When I led teams into Iraq, I always had some Delta Force guys embedded in the team. And they had a Delta Force squadron standing by to rescue us because we always assumed we were going to be taken
Super
hostage.
high risk, yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't like, geeky city. This is the real deal.
Of course.
And so we're doing this. I had guys go in and we intercepted Saddam's securities communications, encrypted communications. I went to Israel, got them to break the code and read us the stuff. So we're getting close to finding the truth. And the U.S. says, no, we don't want the truth. And they shut my operation down. Wow. And that's when I resigned. The day I resigned,
what year was this when you left?
I left in August of 1998.
This is and for the audience, this is well before 9/11. This is well before we invaded Iraq in 2003. So you're saying they were disarmed since the late 90s?
They were disarmed since probably 1995, 1996.
What a fucking bombshell, dude.
So so now I get called into the CIA, and this is a guy, I can say his name now because it's
declassified probably.
Larry Sanchez. And Larry Sanchez, from 1994 until 1998 was the senior liaison of the CIA with the inspection teams. And he and I had a pretty good working relationship. We trusted each other. And so he called me and he said, hey, before you resign, somebody in the National Security Council wants to talk to you because they want to talk you out of it. I said, okay, I'll take the call. So I talked to the guy and they basically said, if you resign, you'll destroy the inspections. You have to stay. And I said, you're destroying the inspections. The inspections are about doing what the Security Council of the United Nations tells them to do, not what the United States says behind the scenes. Our job is to disarm. You have to let me finish the job or I can't stay on. He said, no, well, we're not going to change the way we're doing business. So I left. I hung up. Larry Sanchez turned to me. What's the rating of the show? What can I say?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. He turned to me and he said, Scott, we're friends. We've been friends for a long time. But if you turn in that letter of resignation, I can never talk to you again. He said, not only that, the FBI is going to fuck you in the ass. The FBI is going to hunt you down. They're going to ruin your life. They're going to ruin your family's life. They're going to make your life a living hell. He said, so think twice about it. And I said, well, you want me to back down because of that? My job is to defend the truth. I'm doing the right thing. I'm speaking out for truth. And he said, don't say I didn't warn you. And the FBI has been trying to fuck me in the ass ever since. But I feel like I had a duty to go out and speak out because we ended up going to war in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction.
Yes. Yeah.
And the point is, I'm trying to tell you, as of 1998, I was trying to make the case that if you're going to say they have weapons of mass destruction, then you have to let me do my job.
Yeah.
But you can't use my job to go to war. You have to use my job to disarm.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to let me disarm, then I can't be part of this mission.
Yeah.
And then later on, when they kept pushing this stuff, I had to tell the truth. I said, look, the United States isn't here to disarm Iraq. They're here to get rid of Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
That there aren't weapons of mass destruction. We got rid of the weapons of mass destruction. Whatever we don't have is so small, so minuscule, so dated. To give you an example, there's certain, biological weapons.
Yeah.
Remember Colin Powell putting up that white vial?
Yes.
This can kill the world.
Yes.
Well, it's horseshit. Why? Because first of all, the Iraqis never produced dry powdered anthrax. What they made was wet sludge, basically a slurry. Now, here's the interesting, they have growth media that they put in petri dishes, biological production scale, produce it up, and you get this sludge.
And this is the same anthrax that hit us after 9/11, right?
No, the anthrax that hit us after 11 was the white powder.
Oh, okay. That's what Colin Powell was talking about. Okay.
Yeah, this stuff is basically mud.
Okay.
All right. And they put the mud in a warhead, and they said, that's a biological warhead. That's a biological weapon. I said, that's not. That's sludge in a metal canister. You fire it. The only way it's going to kill you is if it hits you in the head, because if it lands next to you on the ground and bursts open, the sludge is just going to go into the ground. Unless you get on your hands and knees and eat it, you're not going to die. So the Iraqis never had a real biological weapons program, but that sludge there only has a limited shelf life. So let's say they hid some of it from us in 1991.
Yeah.
By 1995, it's no good.
Oh.
It's turned into just pure mud.
Okay.
And we know they didn't produce any more.
Has a shelf life?
Absolute shelf life. Same thing with the chemical weapons. So in 1998, when they're saying Iraq has this, Iraq has that, we're going, well, we can't prove that they destroyed everything. We can prove they destroyed 97%.
Yeah.
But the stuff that we can't find, I can guarantee you by science that it's useless.
Yeah.
It's meaningless. So why are we treating it as if it's a real weapon?
Yeah.
Because the Security Council says 100%. Okay, I would accept that if you would accept that when we find 100%, like we did with the missiles, you would lift the sanctions on Iraq and bring them back in, as the deal is.
Because that was the whole purpose.
That was
why
the
they
deal.
even allowed you guys to come in there was to lift the sanctions so they can be a part of the economy and make money and not be broke and poor.
And yet we had repeated secretaries of state, starting with James Baker in 1992, going on to Madeleine Albright, saying that even if Iraq complies with its obligation to disarm, economic sanctions will never be lifted until Saddam Hussein is removed from power. It was always a setup. It was always a scam.
Why was the U.S., because we got a lot of guys here that might be younger, they might not even remember or know who Saddam Hussein is. Why was the U.S. so hell-bent on getting him out of power?
Well, there was once upon a time, Saddam was our friend. In fact, if you go back and you Google Donald Rumsfeld and Saddam Hussein.
Didn't he get a key to the city of Detroit?
Well, I don't know about
something like that.
Well, Donald Rumsfeld went there and shook his hand.
Okay.
And we gave Saddam Hussein $1 billion loans so he could buy weapons of mass destruction and other things. It's funny how we condemn him for using chemical weapons, but I used to debrief a defector named Wafiq Samurai. He was the head of Iraqi intelligence, and he would tell me stories about how American specialists from the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA would come to Baghdad and show him the best ways to use chemical weapons in their offenses against the Iranians, especially the Al Faw offensive at the end. Al Faw is a peninsula at the end of the Shatt el Arab waterway that the Iranians had crossed over and dug in on, and the Iraqis broke their back by using chemical weapons. We're the ones that gave them the satellite imagery that showed the Iranian force disposition and all that. So we helped them use chemical weapons. Some people say that we gave them the money to help them buy the precursors that made the chemical weapons. And then we turn around and condemn them for having chemical weapons. Now, I'm not saying that Saddam should have them. I'm just saying how hypocritical can we be? But what happened is, at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq was sort of emboldened. They felt like they had stood up to Iran and indeed Israel and the rest of the world. And so they were filling their oats. And so what they said is that their weapons of mass destruction programs weren't just to deter Iranian aggression. They said it's to deter Israeli aggression. And that's when the Americans went, oh, you can't say that. You're not allowed to do that. And when Israel in the summer of 1990 said they were threatening to hit the Iranian nuclear program, bomb it again, the Iraqis said, if you do that, we'll burn half of Israel with our chemical weapons. That's our deterrence. And that's when America went, we got a problem here. Then Saddam invades Kuwait, and
put Saudi Arabia in a tough spot.
Put Saudi Arabia in a tough spot, put the world oil community. But let's talk about why he invaded Kuwait, because everybody's just like, well, Saddam's a brutal aggressor, he invaded Kuwait. Yeah, you see, Kuwait during the 8-year Iran-Iraq war was doing slant drilling. That means you set up a drill rig in Kuwaiti soil and you drill across the border into the oil reservoir on our Iraq side, and they're stealing billions of dollars worth of Iraqi oil. Now, the Iraqis let them do it, because they're at war. Then the Kuwaitis turn around and they loan Iraq $20 billion. And
wait, so Iraq let Kuwait do it?
Well, they were at war, so they were like,
oh, they didn't have the time to deal with it.
Yeah, we're not going to deal with this now.
Yeah, okay, we're fighting.
But then after war, what they told the Kuwaitis is, we got all it's called the London Group of Banks who are coming at us for these loans, but you're stealing our oil and dump it on the economy, on the market, and you're depressing the price of oil down to $14 a barrel, and now we can't make enough money to pay off the loans.
Okay.
We need you to stop doing this. This is economic warfare. And America told the Kuwaitis, no, keep going.
Yeah.
And so the Kuwaitis were like,
benefit.
Yeah, no, we're going to do it. So they kept going. The Iraqis said, you guys don't seem to understand. They called together the Arab League in July of 1990, and they said, guys, this is serious. If they keep doing this, we'll have no choice but to invade them. Tell them to stop. Arab League said nothing. So in August,
is Arab League, what countries are? I'm assuming all the
main
countries.
all the
Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan,
Algeria, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So the Iraqis go into Kuwait in August of 1990. They said, "The hell with you. We're finishing this thing." But again, it's people say it was Saddam just decided to wake up one morning and invade Kuwait. That's not how it was. But now he invades Kuwait, and George Herbert Walker Bush, W's father, gets out, and when
George Sr.,
and when he gets out, he's trying to explain to the American people why we have to get ready to go to war, and he said it's about oil.
Yeah,
and the American people went, "We ain't buying that oil war. We're not doing it."
Yeah,
and he went, "Oops, we can't talk about oil anymore. Let's talk about something else." So that's when they started bringing in the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, who testified before Congress claiming that she saw Iraqi soldiers ripping Kuwaiti children out of their incubators and killing them. All a lie, 100% lies. We just started creating the image of the evil. Now, I'm not saying Saddam's a good guy. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that
he did his fucked up shit, but
we had a PR campaign. Just remember, as bad as he was shaking Donald Rumsfeld's hand, and he was considered the best friend of America in the mid 1980s.
Wow.
Suddenly in 1990, we had to turn him into, and this is what happened. In a fundraiser, I believe in Dallas, Texas, George Herbert Walker Bush called Saddam Hussein the Middle East equivalent of Adolf Hitler, who must have Nuremberg-like retribution, which means now that you called him Hitler, you have to get rid of him. How can you let Hitler live?
Yeah.
And you have to bring him into trial. So now we go to war, and I was in that war. We fought it. And I can tell you, we had a plan to get rid of Saddam. I can also tell you here, I was tasked, there was a week of my time in the war where my job was to assassinate Saddam Hussein.
Wow.
I was given targets. I had to verify the targets and then turn them over to the Air Force, and we were dropping bombs on targets to kill Saddam. We were actively going after the guy. But when the war ended, it ended because...
What year did it end?
It ended in late February of 91.
Okay.
It was a very short war.
Yeah.
It started on January 17th of 91, ended on February 29th or 28th, around there. But it ended because basically...
He pulled out of Kuwait?
Well, he started retreating. And what do you do when you have a column of enemy equipment on a highway? You bomb the lead vehicle, you bomb the rear vehicle, so the column can't move.
Yeah.
And then you kill everything in between.
Yep.
And from a military perspective, it's beautiful, baby. It's beautiful because that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's what war's all about.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, CNN now is filming this, and it became bad TV.
Oh.
They're calling it the highway of death. We're murdering the Iraqis. Well, it's war. Murder away. I mean, these are the guys that raped Kuwait, occupied Kuwait. All those vehicles were full of stolen goods they were taking out of Kuwait. No sympathy for the men in that column. Kill them all. But we stopped. When the war started, when I got the op order on day one, I opened it up. It said that the strategic objective, the center of gravity, was Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard. About 6 divisions that he had there, elite forces that propped him up, kept him in. We said we must destroy the Republican Guard so that Saddam Hussein collapses, because he's Adolf Hitler, he has to collapse.
Of course.
But because of the highway of death, the rest of the battle, bringing the pincers in, surrounding the Republican Guard, we were literally 36 hours away from killing them all, 30, 40,000. And believe me, I wanted them all dead. That's what needed to happen. But Colin Powell went, no, this is bad TV, bad imagery. We stopped right before we finished the job.
Oh, wow.
And those divisions went away and suppressed the Kurdish uprising in the north, the Shia uprising in the south, and they kept Saddam Hussein in power. So we had a chance
to get rid of him back in the 90s.
But we didn't. So now
fast forward.
Now we have a situation where George Herbert Walker Bush, who called Saddam Hussein Hitler, the war ends and Hitler's still alive.
Yeah.
So now the question is, how do we do this? So the CIA came in and briefed. They said, Saddam's in a very weak position right now. His military has just been destroyed. His economy is in tatters. The only thing he has going for him is these weapons of mass destruction. So what we need to do is get rid of them, and then Saddam will collapse. We want Saddam gone. So they created the weapons inspectors to go in to put at risk the third pillar of power, the weapons of mass destruction. But there was no end game. They created us, but they never expected us to finish the job. Our job was to go in and go through the motions of challenging the weapons of mass destruction. Then 6 months later, Saddam was supposed to go bye-bye. 6 months goes by and he's still there. And now he's challenging the inspectors. And that's when I came in. We had to change the game 6 months later because Saddam wasn't going anywhere. And believe me, while I was a weapons inspector, I'll give you two instances. In the summer of 1996, we believed that they were hiding documents and material in Special Republican Guard units around Baghdad International Airport, because that's sort of a fortified zone.
Yeah.
And so what we also believed that they would evacuate them up to Tikrit, which is Saddam Hussein's birthplace, where he had other palaces. So if we stressed them, they would retreat to Tikrit. So we put in place systems to detect this movement.
Yeah.
And we're going in to surround it and all this stuff. And I'm building this big inspection team to go in. And I told you I had a close relationship with the CIA. We had about a dozen CIA guys on our team, paramilitary guys, who are logistics and communications guys.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that they had another job. There was a coup being plotted, built around my inspection. My team was supposed to come in and surround Special Republican Guard facilities, freeze them in place, and then create an incident. And as we're pulled out, cruise missiles would come in and destroy these facilities. There was one unit, the 3rd Battalion of the Special Republican Guard, that I wanted to inspect, but it was sort of outside the palace area. The CIA said, don't worry about that unit. It's okay, but it's not a big deal. I said, but we said we're going to inspect them all. We have to inspect this one. Don't worry about it. Well, the reason why is that was their unit. They had bought the officers. That was the unit that was going to go kill Saddam.
Yeah.
But the problem is the Iraqis have good intelligence.
Yeah.
And they broke into the CIA plot and they knew everything.
Yeah.
And when the time came, instead of a coup taking place, they pulled the guys out, they popped them all in the head, then they called up the CIA guy on their own satellite communication system and said, it's all over, guys, goodbye. And they hung up. Wow. Now that's cool if you're an Iraqi. It's bad if you're the CIA. But imagine me as an inspector
puts you in
the middle
a really
of this,
weird spot.
and the Iraqis are looking at me going, "What were you doing?"
Yeah.
I said, "I didn't know anything about it."
Yeah.
And they said, "You're an American. You're an intelligence officer. These guys worked for you." And that really
because they don't know the difference between a Marine and the CIA. They don't know the difference.
They don't know the difference between an American's an American is American.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, just so people understand, I'm as American as you get.
Of course.
You won't meet a more patriotic person than me. But when I joined the weapons inspection team, I went down to Washington, D.C., and I demanded a meeting at the State Department with the State Department, the CIA, the Defense Department, all the players.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to create this intelligence unit. I need to know the rule of the game. I need to know the rules. Is this a wink, wink, nod, nod thing? Meaning that we're going to do something, but really something else is happening?
Yeah.
You have to tell me up front.
That's crazy. They didn't tell you.
No, what they said is, no. We insist that you comply with Security Council resolutions. You're going to build a unit and you work for the executive chairman. You work for the United Nations. And I said, you guys understand that once you tell me this, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. That's
my mission. They said, that's what we want you to do.
So is that normal where, like, for example, you have a plan of action that they tell you to do, and then they bring in outside people to make this other alternate plan? Is that normal to happen?
For the CIA, it's normal. Yeah. What I learned about the CIA, with all due respect to all the CIA guys listening, you know what I'm saying is true. They lie, they cheat, they steal. That's what they do for a living. They can't be trusted. If you're in the CIA and you got the secret decoder ring, then you're part of the team. But if you're outside the CIA, even if you're an American, even if you're a loyal American, even if you're a loyal American who's, gone to war for his country, you're not part of the team.
Yeah.
And the CIA spent that meeting took place in October of 1991. And I spent the next 7 years beating my head against the wall, going to war against the CIA for this. The last story I'll tell you, the Iraqis kicked me out, my inspection team out in January of 1998, accused me of being a CIA officer, the whole works. And they said, we're not going to work with Ritter ever again because he's evil.
Yeah.
Now, we can't allow that to happen because that means the Iraqis are dictating who gets to be on inspection teams.
Yeah.
So there's a big rigmarole, the challenge. And I was tasked with leading an inspection team back in to challenge the Iraqis. The Iraqis had agreed to certain rules and stuff. A challenge inspection. I went to the White House and I briefed the White House on the inspection concept of operations. I went to the State Department, briefed that. We briefed it to Pentagon. And finally, we're at the U.S. Mission in New York where Ambassador Bill Richardson's at. He's the head ambassador. He's there. His deputy's there. The CIA's there. My boss, Richard Butler's there. Charles Dulfer's there. And I'm there. And basically, Richard Butler, a UN official, gets up with a whiteboard and he starts drawing dates on it. And he goes, okay, Ritter, you got to go in on this date. And then you have to create a crisis here. And the crisis was I had to inspect the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. Now, the Iraqis had told us that if we ever tried to inspect the Ministry of Defense, that was a red line, it would mean war. And I said, why are we inspecting the Ministry of Defense? That's not on my target list. They said, well, the Americans have put it on the target list. And I said, why? What's the arms control reason? We believe that they're hiding documents related to weapons of mass destruction. I said, but you know, it's war. And they said, do your job. I said, okay, I'll do my job. But I said, it's strange that we're sitting there coordinating our inspection timeline with America's ability to go to war. You're telling me I have to create a crisis here so America can bomb in here. And they're all saying, well, yes. And I said, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to have the inspection on that date. That's my job. They said, good. So I took my team in. We show up at the Ministry of Defense and the guns come out, the whole thing. They're not going to let us in. It's high tension. And the Iraqis come over. They said, what are you doing? And I said, I got to inspect. And they said, you can't. This is the Ministry of Defense. This is war. And I said, you got to let me in. They said, well, we aren't going to let you in. I said, guys, let me just be very blunt with you. If you don't let me in, the missiles are going to blow this place up. They're going to kill you. Everybody I'm talking to is going to be dead. You may kidnap me. I may die. It doesn't matter. If you let me in, I can promise you that I'm going to do my job. You know me. If you have weapons of mass destruction stuff in there, I'm going to find it. If I find it, you're screwed. But if you don't have it, you also know me. I will walk away. I'm not here to spy on you, but you got to let me in. They went back to Tariq Aziz. They went back to Saddam Hussein. Meanwhile, Madeleine Albright's in France. She's the Secretary of State. She's with her French counterpart, and she's bragging. Hey, we got the missiles inbound, baby. We're going to get the war we want. Yeah. The French are going, how do you know? We got it fixed. We got our inside man. He's going to make it happen. That was me.
Yeah.
And the Iraqis came back and they said, okay, Ritter, we'll let you in.
Oh, shit.
And I got to take my team in. We spent 16 hours in the Ministry of Defense going through everything. We didn't find anything related to weapons of mass destruction, and we left.
Damn.
There was no war. The Americans are so pissed off at me.
Did you get, I was going to say, did you get?
Well, no, that was in March of 1998.
Yeah.
And like I told you, by August 1998, they had shut my program down. That's why I resigned. Because they weren't letting me do my job anymore.
Yeah.
There's a saying that people follow, certain higher up people follow, where it says, out of chaos comes order. Is that a thing you think Americans use to their advantage? Chaos comes order?
I think Americans create chaos so that they can dictate an outcome.
Right.
Yeah, because it's easier. You know, first of all, most humans are rational players. So if you sit down with people and say, hey, look, the solution I'm offering is we're going to put cruise missiles in on the site, kill a whole bunch of people, and pick up the pieces, they go, you're a madman. But now if I create chaos, if I create an incident, if I make it look like there is no other choice, then that's the option. And that's the American way of doing business.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
I didn't want to interrupt you while you were telling that story. But just to bring it back full circle, because I asked originally, why did they want Saddam so bad? And it seems to me everything was all good in the 80s. It wasn't until he threatened to attack Israel that we said, no, we need this guy gone.
Well, he was a political problem. George Herbert Walker Bush compared him to Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay, here's some other news.
But that was after he made that threat, right? To
against Israel, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all about Israel.
Okay.
But here's the deal. George Herbert Walker Bush lost his re-election bid. And Slick Willie won the election. And Slick Willie's coming in.
Y'all know who Slick Willie is? I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
So Slick Willie's going to be the president. But
Willie, that's the first I heard that shit.
I'm in Baghdad, and we're called into the oil minister's office, who's also he was a general who helped build all the weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And I'm coming in to try and make a point about our inspection, because it was always me telling them, you have to do this. This is what the law says. And they're pushing back saying, you're trying to kill Iraqi children. There's a screaming matches. So I'm coming back in and we're you got to let us in. We got to do the job. And he's looking at me going, you can play Mr. Colonial Master all you want. Your days are numbered. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, we got guys talking with Clinton's guys, and it's going to be okay. When Bill Clinton becomes president, we're going to make good. America's going to come in. They're going to develop our oil. The sanctions are going to be lifted, and you guys are going to be no more. So go ahead and be big now, but it's over. It's over. It's finished. Amr Rashid was the guy's name. And we're looking at each other going, wow, the Clinton guys are talking to the Iraqis. That's amazing. Well, what happened after that? I don't think people understand. George Herbert Walker Bush's last day in office, on Inauguration Day, Bill Clinton's getting sworn in. Yeah. You know what happened that day? No. Besides an inauguration?
What?
We bombed Iraq.
Oh.
We bombed Iraq. We started a war. And then when that didn't break up events, even after that, when Bill Clinton said, that's okay, we'll work through this, we cooked up an assassination attempt. You remember George Herbert Walker Bush was supposed to go to Kuwait, but suddenly there was an assassination attempt. The Iraqis were going to kill him. The Kuwaitis had uncovered this assassination team. The problem is the explosives that they uncovered, they were Iraqi explosives, but the batch number was related to explosives that were brought in August and left behind.
Oh, so they're American explosives.
They're Kuwaiti explosives. The Kuwaitis cooked this up. All the guys that they confessed, they got their confessions, and the FBI came in, and the guys are going, yeah, but they tortured us. Now you're an FBI officer.
Oh yeah, you can't take it.
I can't take it. I can't do this. But it doesn't matter. The CIA came to Bill Clinton and said, you can't allow the Iraqis to think they can assassinate an American president. You have to do something. And so in June, he fired cruise missiles at the Iraqi intelligence headquarters, and that ended the potential of solving that problem. From that moment on, Bill Clinton now
inherited
that problem. Right. And that's why in 1996, Bill Clinton ordered the assassination of Saddam Hussein. He ordered it again in 1997. In 1998, he signs the Iraq Liberation Act that made the elimination of Saddam Hussein the policy of the land. So getting rid of Saddam Hussein wasn't about how evil Saddam was. He was a political liability to American presidents. His continued survival was an embarrassment to George Herbert Walker Bush, then Bill Clinton, and then W. Remember W?
Yeah. Junior.
That man tried to kill my father. Yeah. That's why we went to war, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. That's it in a nutshell. It wasn't about weapons of mass destruction. It's that George W. Bush had a hard-on for Saddam, because he believes Saddam tried to kill his father, even though that was a made-up assassination attempt.
By the Kuwaitis. When after the war, during time, I've inspected the Iraqi intelligence headquarters. Yeah. I've looked through their files. Yeah. There was nothing. After the war, when we captured the headquarters and all the Iraqi intelligence officers and interrogated and all that, you'd think that if we found proof of this assassination attempt, it'd be front page news. Yeah.
Have you heard anything about it?
Oh, wow.
Why not? Because it never happened. It was made up.
Holy shit, man. Guys, Scott Ritter. Ritter, man. I mean, you got someone who was actually there inspecting the weapons in Iraq. Like, bro.
But the fact that he found nothing there and he still went ahead and did what he did just says a lot about America, man.
Damn.
Wow.
Damn, bro.
Not just that. Remember, this war cost several thousand American lives.
Yeah.
And hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, millions of Iraqis displaced. I'm not, like I said, I'm a Marine, and war's war. You want to go to war against me, you're going to die. I mean, not anymore. I'm 61 years old, so I'm not going to kill too much anymore. But
how many of your buddies died during that time?
Actually, I was very fortunate. I've only had a handful of people die over time. But during the actual Gulf War, only, I say only, but, about 150 Americans lost their lives at that time. And none of them were, I can't say none of them. There were, there's a helicopter that went down that had some people on there, but, no, we escaped. It's not like this current war. I mean, where, thousands of people died. But remember, I just want Americans to reflect on this. Every American life lost in Iraq is because, not because of the Iraqis or Al-Qaeda or ISIS. I have to tell you this: when Saddam Hussein was in power,
Mhm.
there was no Al Qaeda or ISIS in Iraq.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's true.
That all came up
they'll
afterwards.
Never admit that. Yeah, and Saddam and Osama hated each other.
100%.
Like, I don't understand how we drew that
we made
connection after 9/11.
We made it up.
Yeah,
we made it up out of thin air. But my point is, this war didn't need to be fought. Saddam was willing to do whatever it was necessary to make good with America. He proved it with Bill Clinton. He was still willing to do it leading up to this war. We went to war on a lie because an American president got his feelings hurt because a lie was told to him about an attempted assassination against his father. The United States has a lot of blood on its hands. And people need to, we need to just wake up and take responsibility for this at some point in time, because if we don't, if we forgive that, then it sort of explains why everything we do today, and I think we're probably going to get into Ukraine eventually.
Yeah.
Everything we do today is predicated on the same pattern of behavior, the same pattern that was exhibited by the United States in Iraq, the lies, the distortions, etc., is what happened in Ukraine. Nothing you're being told about Ukraine today is the truth, just like nothing you were told about Iraq was the truth back then.
Wow, man.
Welcome to the news, man.
Holy shit, bro.
You are fake news.
At least now, right, with people being able to have their own platforms, independent media, you can kind of combat the BS with the Russia-Ukraine stuff. But back in the 90s, that was it. You had Fox News, CNN, what they told you is what it was. And I think that's how they were able to so easily go to war back in the early 2000s, because after 9/11 happened, it was a sensitive moment. Everyone was patriotic. They're like, yeah, we got to go war on terror. And then we're able to like lie to everybody and say, oh, yeah, Osama is connected to Saddam, when in reality, like, Osama wanted to go to war with Saddam when he invaded Kuwait, because people don't know. It amazes me how people don't know this. Osama's a Saudi, guys. Well, not by lineage, but he's Saudi Arabian. And when he invaded Kuwait, he wanted to fight for the royal family, but they said, no, we have the Americans. And then Osama took that as an insult, because he's like, why do we have infidels defending a Muslim land, blah, blah, blah. And then he talked poorly about the Saudi government, and then they basically ostracized him and sent his ass to Sudan and took his citizenship away. When
I, during the war, a little war story.
Yeah.
I was attached to Special Operations Command. That's part of Central Command. But a guy named Jesse Johnson ran it. A brave guy. He was involved in Desert One and all this stuff. But he called me in. He had a problem. He said, the Saudis have approached us, and they've got a whole bunch of these mujahideen from Afghanistan in a camp, and they're asking us if we can do anything with them. And
you want to tell the people real quick, because they might not know who mujahideen is.
The mujahideen are the Saudi freedom fighters. Basically, during in 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and then the CIA, working with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, put together a covert action to recruit jihadists, or Muslims who went on jihad against the Soviet Union, to fight against the Soviet Union. Osama bin Laden was one of the Saudis who funded it, built camps, etc.
They don't talk about that in history class.
They won't talk about that. But so there's a whole bunch of Saudis that went to Pakistan, that went into Afghanistan, and then when the fighting ended, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, they came to Saudi Arabia and said, just like you said, they said, hey, let us defend this. And the Saudis were saying, no. So now the Saudis went, what do we do with this guy? So Jesse Johnson comes to me, he goes, what should we do with these guys? And I said, you want the truth? He said, yeah. I said, kill them all right now, surround them and kill them all, every single one of them. He said, well, we can't do that. And I said, well, then
paid them money. The CIA funded them.
I said, let's just, I said, you can't integrate them. You can't empower them. You're going to have to ignore them. But I said, somebody's going to have a plan for these guys when this war is done.
Yeah.
Because by ignoring them, we're going to, excuse my language, piss them off.
Yeah.
Well, we ignored them. We pissed them off, and the rest is history.
Wow.
And then the Mujahideen ended up being what you guys know now as Al Qaeda.
Al Qaeda.
And we funded them directly to fight the Soviets in the 1980s, bro. Like, yo, it's crazy. Like, when you actually look this stuff up, declassified documents, and you search on the internet, it's all there. It's all public information. But people don't want to know. People don't want to teach it. And
my thing is, I agree. You don't want to know the truth, but how can we ever stop it? Like, how do you ever combat this? Like, just
truth. Truth. I mean, here's the hard part. American citizens have to understand that the way this country is built, and I know people are going to come back and say, you're so naive, Scott, and all that. Maybe. But if you again, just read the documents. We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union. That's the Constitution.
Yep.
Okay. We, the people, we're the power People keep saying that elections are cooked, elections are meaningless and all that. They're cooked because we let them become cooked.
Yeah.
They're cooked because we've allowed political parties to come in and take over the responsibility.
I got to ask you about Trump too. Let me write that down.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Trump
But
situation.
I'm just saying that, being a good citizen is hard work. I'll give you another short story just to underscore this. During the buildup to the Iraq War, I was on TV a lot, getting beat up because I was trying to tell the truth, and it didn't matter that we're talking about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, and I was the guy who ran intelligence for it.
So were you on, like, on Fox News and stuff?
I was on Fox News, CNN, the whole thing. But every time I come on, they'd have like 5 guys against me.
Right.
Or I'd speak, and then they'd bring in, and these guys knew nothing about WMD. They were literally, Clifford Mays, a political guy, this, that.
Yeah.
But they'll like,
never stepped a foot in fucking Iraq.
Not at all. And I'm the guy who did the job.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm the guy that did the job. Well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So anyways, we're going in, and these are good friends of mine. We play golf and all this stuff. I've known them forever. And on Monday nights, we used to go out, watch Monday Night Football, get wings, get beer, and sit there and talk. And I didn't want to get too political because these are my friends. But I was just like, guys, what's up? What's going on? And they said, come on, Scott, it's not fair. They said, you lived this. This was your life. You got paid to know this stuff. This is your job 24/7. Man, we got real lives. I get up in the morning, I got to go do my job. I do it for 8 hours. I have to come home. I barely have any time. And here, when I do have time, I come out with you guys on Monday night to relax. The last thing I want to do is talk about, and I sort of felt bad. I went, you're right. I'm sorry. I apologize. Then the game starts. These guys are in fantasy football leagues, and they're all sitting there. Oh man, what kind of play is that? It's not a high percentage play. On that play, that if you went off the left tackle, you're going to have 4 yards. And I'm like, that's a lot of statistics you're throwing out there.
Yeah.
How do you know that? Oh, we study it. We get the books and we read up and we study all our players and we go online. I said, so you're willing to spend 25 hours a week studying fantasy fucking football.
Yep.
And yet you don't have time when an American's going to go to war and die.
Yep.
Our priorities are screwed up. Excuse my language. I apologize for that bad word.
No, you can swear, bro. This price are fit, man.
But,
we don't want sports, man.
Yeah.
No, but I used to. I don't watch sports as much as I used to. I love sports, but again, I'm just sitting there saying there's just so much going on in the world today that's so important that on Sunday when I could be watching football, I used to love watching football. I'm a Miami Dolphin fan from way back. People don't know that.
Dan Marino days.
Oh, Bob Greasy days. What are you talking about?
Oh shit, way back. Mo in the back going crazy.
In 1969, my father I was a young kid, 69. I was 8 years old, and my dad is
Zodiac Killer was running around killing bitches in San Francisco at that time.
my dad was trying to do a house project on a Sunday, and I was being a pain in the ass as every 8-year-old kid is. So he picks me up, throws me in front of the couch. Back then we had the Zenith. So he put aluminum foil on the thing, got the screen in, click around, and there's a football game on.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, your job is to watch this team. He looked at it, he goes, that's Miami Dolphins. That's Bob Greasy. He's fresh out of Purdue. And I want to report, is he a good quarterback or not? And like a good kid, I sat there and I watched the game. And afterwards I went, Bob Greasy's a great quarterback. And I fell in love with Bob Greasy, and I was a Miami Dolphin fan for life. And a couple of years later, they had the undefeated season. Then they won the Super Bowl after that. And I'm like, I picked the best team in the world. And they've never done anything since then. And it's been the most horrible experience for me. But I'm a huge Dolphin fan.
Damn. Wow. So just to sum up the Iraq version before we go on to Ukraine and Russia. Guys, like the goddamn video, you guys are getting like crazy value right now. Like you got someone who actually had boots on the ground in Iraq and can conclusively tell you how there were no weapons of mass destruction after 1998, pretty much. Yeah. So to me, it looks like there's a couple reasons why we want Saddam out of power. One, personal vengeance. Two, issues for Israel, who's an ally. And then third,
just about look for the.
Could you say oil, or is that a lazy explanation?
No, well, first of all, how can you be lazy about oil? It runs everything.
Yeah.
But it's.
But I hate saying, "Oh, we invaded for oil."
It's not just for oil.
Than that. Yeah.
It's for. Look, there's a guy who I don't have too much use for, but he, he had his moment. Wesley Clark. He was a 4-star general, commander of NATO forces, and he went on and told a story about right after 9/11. he was called into a meeting, I think, with Paul Wolfowitz, who was a deputy secretary of defense at the time. And there was a briefing where they said that they're going to go to war in Iraq. And of course, the question was, Iraq didn't attack us. Why are we going to war in Iraq?
Yep.
You know, it was sort
Asking
of
good questions.
It was these guys out of Afghanistan. But if you want to really be honest about it, it was these guys out of Hamburg, Germany. I mean, if we're really going to bomb the place that the planning for 9/11 was done, that's Hamburg, Germany. But we didn't bomb that. But why Iraq? And they said, well, because this is going to be the beginning of a strategy where we're going to invade 7 countries. The idea was that we were going to use Iraq as the beginning of wiping everybody out in the Middle East and putting all these governments in place that would be sympathetic to Israel. We went to war against Iraq to get rid of Israel's #1 threat, Saddam Hussein. That's why we went to war against Iraq.
Hey man, he said it.
Well, no, but again, I mean, just to back it up, because in case there's YouTube,
Welcome to Fresh and Fit, bitches.
in case there's YouTube censors out there, let me just wait. In 1994, I traveled to Israel, October of 1994, on a secret mission with the United Nations. We needed Israeli intelligence help, and the people say, "Well, why would you go to Israel? They're the enemies of Iraq." That's exactly why we went to Israel. You see, we're getting close to being able to close the books on Iraqi weapons programs. We're coming close to accounting for everything, but the Israelis were making noise. They said, no, we don't trust these people. And here's my concern. If we went forward and said we accounted for everything, I know that the Israelis would take an envelope and they'd slide it under the door of every member of Congress, and they'd open it up and there'd be intelligence that shows that the Iraqis were holding on to something.
Yeah.
And then we're ruined. So I said, why don't we preempt this? We'll go to Israel and we'll get them involved. And that's why I went to
inspections.
With intelligence.
Yeah,
I was the intelligence guy. So I went in there and I said, I need their
That
help.
explains why you worked with Mossad.
Oh, hell yeah. There. Well, Mossad indirectly, the guys I worked directly for were Amman, military intelligence.
Okay.
But Mossad is everywhere.
Yeah, facts.
Can't escape.
They might be in this room, but
they're on our phones.
They're on our phone. But but I went there and we started a relationship with the Israelis there. And it was I'm talking about a very close relationship. I worked with the head of intelligence. When I'd come, I'd be briefing. I met the Minister of Defense. We worked together.
Yeah.
They were very open with me about the threats. I mean, they introduced, for instance, they have a guy they call the Doubting Thomas. His job was after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, when the Egyptians surprised them. They said, how did we be taken by surprise? And they said, it's because nobody would ask questions. Intelligence assessments would come in and people just accepted that they were accurate. Nobody challenged them. So the Doubting Thomas's job was to challenge everything. And so I briefed the Doubting Thomas so that he could challenge every assessment. And the Israelis worked very closely with us. We literally drained their intelligence databases and turned them into inspections so that the Israelis were believing me when I said there's nothing.
Yeah.
But they were getting very comfortable.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of it. In 1991, during the war, when the Iraqis started firing Scud missiles into Israel, the Israelis would sound off these alarms.
Yeah.
And the Israelis had put saran wrap on their house, turned it and all this. They put in the gas mask on, but they put it on wrong. Babies suffocated in their mother's arms.
Oh, wow.
Old people died because the gas mask, they suffocated. A lot of Israelis died and there was panic. People fled and all this stuff. Oh. And it was a big deal.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And so now the head of intelligence is coming to me and he calls me and he goes, okay, I have to go brief the prime minister right now. This was in 1994. The Saudis were making a move on Kuwait. The Americans were putting Patriot missiles in place. Everybody believed the Iraqis would fire Scuds again. He said, I have to go brief the prime minister. We have to make a decision. Do we release gas masks to the Israeli people in preparation for this? He said, the last time we did it was a disaster. He said, so I need you to tell me right now, does Iraq have Scud missiles that can be tipped with chemical weapons that can hit Israel?
What'd you say?
I said, no. And he believed me. And he went and briefed the prime minister of Israel, and they didn't issue the gas masks.
Wow. Okay.
So my point is the Israelis were actually believing what we were saying.
Yeah. But they were involved in all the inspections.
By the time I left, when I started, Iraq was their #1 threat.
Yeah. They
tried to kill Saddam. There was an assassination attempt against Saddam
I believe
that went, this went bad. They did a rehearsal for it. And unfortunately, there was a live fire incident. They ended up killing a bunch of their own guys. So
they're ruthless. They've been killing, Arab powers since the beginning.
I can't comment on that, but I can say that they were trying to kill Saddam.
Yeah.
And it went tits up, and it didn't work. But Saddam was the number one threat. When I left in 1998, Iraq had dropped about number 6.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's the number one threat at that point?
You want it?
America?
You ready for this? No. Orthodox Jews.
What?
The number one threat to Israel.
What?
The number one threat to Israel were right-wing extremist Jews. Well, you say what? Who killed Yitzhak Rabin?
I don't know.
A right-wing extremist Jew. Assassinated the prime minister of Israel.
Oh,
And
shit.
they had opened up this aliyah and allowed all these Russian and Ukrainian Jews to come into Israel, which radically transformed the politics of Israel, shifting it from in the middle, where people were actually talking about the potential of peace with the Palestinians, and moved it to the right. And so the Israeli security service is looking at this saying, we're our own worst enemy. We're the biggest threat to Israel. We are Israelis. That was the number one threat. Iran was number 2, and there were other. Iraq had dropped to number 6.
Egypt was probably on that list.
Egypt was probably even lower than that. I think.
Wow. Yo, what the hell? I did not. That you would not think that. Or were these Orthodox Jewish people? Were they Zionists?
Well, no. That's the problem. There's 2 kinds. The real Orthodox actually don't believe in Israel.
Okay. Because
they say that there can't be an Israel until Messiah has come back and the temple has been rebuilt. And so they say that this is sort of it's against God's teaching to call it the state of Israel, because where's the Messiah? Where's the temple? You're getting ahead of yourselves. But the Israelis that they were worried about, the biggest threat, are the really right-wing conservative people that are the ultra-Zionists who believe in kicking the Palestinians out, don't respect them as human beings. Pretty much what the Israeli government is today was considered to be the greatest threat to Israel back in 1998.
Wow. Holy.
That's a big difference. I didn't even know.
Learn something new every day, man. This is crazy. Guys, like the goddamn video. With that, I'll read these chats real quick, and then we will go ahead and transition over to Ukraine and Russia. Like the video if you guys are tuning in on this special Thursday episode. How can I make money off war short and long term? We'll talk about that. Don't worry, especially with the Russia-Ukraine war. Any updates on Gonzalo Liro's arrest? All we heard from the State Department so far has been crickets. Scott, I'll leave it to you if you want to comment on that or not. It's up to you. If you heard anything.
I know he's been arrested.
I hope he's okay.
I hope he's okay too. I wish nothing but good things for Gonzalo Lira, but I don't know anything about his status.
Yeah, as you guys know, he got picked up by what was it, SBU?
SBU, yeah.
Which is, it's the Ukraine's version of the FBI, I would say.
Combination FBI, CIA.
Yeah.
But let's say he did get what would happen at that point?
If he's dead?
Yeah,
he's dead.
No, think they'd kill an American though?
Yeah, would they kill an American?
That wouldn't be a good look for them.
Well, no, it wouldn't be. But at this point in time, okay, let's just put this in perspective for a second.
Go ahead, please.
I'm on a death list in Ukraine.
I believe it.
No, I am. It's called the Mirtvorts list.
Yeah,
it's a death list. It's put together by the Ukrainian intelligence services, and it's paid for by the U.S. taxpayer.
Okay, I could see that.
It's coordinated with the CIA and the State Department. I'm not the only one on that list. There's many Americans. Tulsi Gabbard's on that list.
Really?
Tucker Carlson's on that list.
What?
Rand Paul's on that list. Shall I continue? All these Americans are on that list.
What the fuck?
And the U.S. government's not saying anything. So now come back to your question. What's the U.S. government going to do if Gonzalo Lira gets topped? Not a damn thing.
Damn.
I would think that would be a bad look because we give them so much aid, but killing an American citizen, like.
But apparently, if you articulate against American policy in Ukraine, you're not an American citizen anymore. At least you're not a good American citizen. And if you're a bad American,
is Trump on that list?
No.
Okay.
Wrong.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy?
Because Trump is anti-war with Ukraine too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I don't. But even as much as people hate Donald Trump, do you remember what happened when there was an allegation of an assassination attempt against George W. Bush?
Yeah.
Bill Clinton fired a cruise missile.
Yeah.
No matter what you think about Donald Trump, he's a former American president.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody puts him on an assassination list, Joe Biden has to take action. So yeah,
okay.
Nobody will put him on an assassination list.
There you go.
All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Can you go over
how serious are China's it's a tongue twister, sea skimming missiles? Let me just put it this way. The Chinese are extraordinarily technologically advanced. They've been, the United States has been threatening to go to war with China over Taiwan and over the South China Sea for a long time now. The Chinese are a mature nation, which means that when you threaten them with war, they prepare for war. These missiles are designed to sink American ships. And if we ever do go to war, unfortunately, you're going to sink a lot of American ships. They're very, very serious weapons, and we need to take the Chinese very seriously. So anybody who thinks that a war with China would be a cakewalk, think again. Russia's new generation nuclear weapons are game changers.
They have more nukes than us, don't they?
Well, they have more tactical nuclear weapons than us. The strategic arms reduction treaty, which is getting ready to expire, limits our delivery systems to 1,550 for each side. So we have parity, but they have better weapons. They built something called the Sarmat, which is a very heavy intercontinental ballistic missile. And the thing about the Sarmat is most intercontinental ballistic missiles, or I should say all, ground-based, are launched and then they go what they call the polar route. So they'll fly over the North Pole to get to the North to the North American landmass, because that's the shortest route.
Okay.
So we have all of our radars and early warning systems built up, layered to come in. Our missile defense is designed to intercept and all that. The Sarmat takes off and goes over the South Pole.
Oh, shit.
And we ain't got anything there. So the Sarmat comes in, there's nothing going to stop it. And it's going to put 36 warheads on our cities, wipe out our country. And then they have something called the Avant-Garde, which is a hypersonic maneuvering warhead. So even when you release a normal warhead, it goes on somewhat of a ballistic trajectory, and you can try and get a solution to shoot it down with anti-ballistic missiles. The Avant-Garde accelerates, maneuvers. You can't shoot it down. And it's precision. It hits. You can't stop it. So we've spent all this money on ballistic missile defense. It don't work. It never will work. The Russians have just trumped us on that. So anybody who thinks, and this is the thing about Russian nuclear doctrine, you have a lot of people right now saying, well, we can have a limited nuclear war. Let's nuke one place and show the Russians we're serious. What they have to understand is that the Russian nuclear doctrine is if you use one nuclear weapon against us, we fire all of ours instantly. And it's the end of the world.
You said 36. You said 36?
That's just for one missile. They have dozens of them.
Wow. And I would assume every single major U.S. city is on that list, probably. New York, Miami, Chicago,
well, here's the thing
Los Angeles,
here's the thing about nuclear targeting. You only need 400 weapons to destroy the world. We've known that for some time now.
Bruh.
400 weapons will destroy every major target worthwhile in the world. They got 1,550, which means when they hit Miami, they're coming in with five warheads. They're going to get a spread load on it just to make sure it's all gone, and it will be all gone.
Fuck, Chris. Wow.
I ain't going to heaven, man.
Nigga, you going to hell.
Yeah, especially with that sound effect usage. Stupid. Damn.
Yeah, so nuclear war is not to be played with. This is the other thing I try to tell people is the last remaining nuclear arms reduction treaty. Again, I just want to remind people, I was the first United States inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union for the first treaty that got rid of nuclear weapons, that began the process of eliminating them.
Yeah.
I always tell people, and I say it sort of tongue in cheek, but I really mean it. When you meet me, shake my hand and buy me a beer. And if you meet any inspector from the INF treaty, shake their hand and buy them a beer. And they'll say, why? Because if it weren't for us, you'd be dead today. And that's the God's honest truth. We saved the world because the weapons we destroyed were so destabilizing that had we not destroyed them, there would have been a mistake. There would have been an error. They would have been fired and the world would have ended. So we got rid of these weapons. We saved the world. And we began a process of nuclear arms reduction.
Yeah.
That process is over right now. We have one treaty left because the United States has withdrawn from all the other treaties, including the one that I did. We've withdrawn from that. We've withdrawn from the anti-ballistic missile treaty. We have one treaty left. We're cheating on it. And we've created, what we're telling the Russians is our goal is strategically defeat you. The strategic defeat of Russia means the end of Russia. And the Russians are saying, yeah, but we have nuclear weapons that say you're not going to achieve that because, as Vladimir Putin has said, a world without Russia isn't a world worth living in. Mm-hmm. So if you want to destroy Russia, Russia's going to destroy the world. And he has the weapons. And so what he's also said is, since you want to destroy us and these weapons guarantee our survival, why would we continue a treaty with you where these weapons are being controlled and inspected and looked at? So the Russians said, screw you, we're done. There's no arms control treaty today. There's one on paper. It expires in 2026. And when that ends, the arms race is on. And now we're going to go back in time to the same. We are getting ready to put the weapons that I destroyed back in place.
Damn.
And I already told you, if those weapons are in place, we're all going to die. This is the God's honest truth. People need to get scared about this stuff. We are going backwards in time, putting in place very dangerous weapon systems, and we're doing it in an environment where we and the Russians aren't getting along.
Wow.
The likelihood of a nuclear war, a world-ending nuclear war, is quite high.
Wow.
Russia had some birth issues because of the 1990s. I think a lot of Americans don't understand what we did to Russia.
Union collapsed.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, we, instead of treating the Soviet Union as a friend that needed help, we treated them as a defeated enemy, and we put our foot on their throat. We made a decision that we were going to destroy them economically, exploit them politically, because we never wanted them to ever rise up again to challenge us the same way that the Soviet Union did. Millions of Russians died. Millions of Russians died in that decade. I just came back from a trip to Russia. I spent 26 days in Russia in May, traveling the entire country, talking to people, meeting people.
They let you in?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit. I thought they weren't letting Americans in right now.
They'll let Americans in who are willing to listen.
Okay.
You know, and we had frank discussions. I'm not, this isn't about going over there on some sort of a propaganda tour. This was the real deal.
Yeah.
But they opened up. A guy showed me a photograph of him and his 7 childhood friends, and he went down each one. He said he committed suicide. He committed suicide. He committed suicide. He's in jail for murder. He, is a drug addict I think he's dead. I don't know where they went.
Yeah.
Why? Because the 1990s was open. In Crimea, during the Soviet Union, they were going to build a nuclear power plant. And so they had started construction on it, and then they recruited the people that are going to run it. Nuclear scientists, physicists, high value people.
Yep.
Good educations and everything. And so they moved their families into this city that they built for them. And then the Soviet Union collapses, and Ukraine says, we're not going to finish the nuclear power plant. So you have all these guys with their families with no job.
Yeah.
And one by one, they started jumping out of buildings.
Yep.
They turn on the gas and kill their family because they had no employment. Life was horrible, et cetera. That happened throughout the Soviet Union, or throughout the former Soviet Union, through Russia.
People don't understand that. Putin remembers that very vividly.
Well, this is why when Americans are like, Putin, you don't understand. Vladimir Putin saved Russia. In 1999, Russia was getting ready to go down the toilet bowl of life because that's what we wanted. We wanted Russia to collapse. We wanted Russia to break up.
Yeah.
And Putin said no. And he rebuilt Russia. So whatever you think about the guy, understand this. From the perspective of the average Russian in the street, he saved them.
Yeah.
He gave them pride. They're not jumping out of windows anymore.
Yeah.
They're living. I just came from Russia. Their economy today, despite the fact that we've been sanctioning them, is the strongest economy in the history of Russia.
That's facts.
It's never been stronger than it is today.
The ruble has been going up, and that's not. Yeah.
Yeah. They just had the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Hundreds of billions of dollars of international investment contracts were signed.
Wow.
Because the world doesn't care about American sanctions. The world is investing in Russia because Russia is a growth industry. I mean, it's under sanctions, so you can't do it. But if sanctions ever get lifted, I'd recommend people call up the economic developers in the city of Novosibirsk, the fastest growing economy in Russia today. You will make some money in Novosibirsk if sanctions are lifted, because that's what's happening. Joe Biden talks about Build Back Better. The Build Back Better plan.
Yeah.
Well, Russia has a real Build Back Better plan. Every city I went to has construction going on nonstop. Their city planners have money pouring in. They're
Cranes
looking
in
for
the air
projects. Everywhere. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'll just say this about Sachs, though: today he's popular. The Russians hate him. Because Sachs in the 1990s went in and he was part of the problem. He was part of the team that was creating the system that destroyed the Russian economy. He thought he was trying, but the Russians despised the man because the policies he was pushing on it didn't work, and they just impoverished a whole bunch of people and empowered the oligarchs. And today he's saying the right things, but I'm just saying, I just came from a country where if I say Jeffrey Sachs' name, they're like, nah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, okay. We already started it, believe it or not, when we talked about the end of the Soviet Union in the decade of the 1990s.
Yeah.
The job of the United States was not to help Russia get back on its feet. The job was to keep Russia down.
Yeah.
And to break Russia up. And Boris Yeltsin was the first president of Russia, and we pretty much owned him. I mean, the National Archives have published the phone calls between Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin. You can go on and read the transcripts. The Russians are saying, "Why are you guys releasing this?" We always viewed presidential communications to be confidential.
Yeah,
but they're releasing it. It's humiliating for Boris Yeltsin, how he's begging Bill Clinton not to do things, and Bill Clinton's just ignoring him, laughing him off. Near the end of it, when they list the names of people listening in, there's one name that appears now: Vladimir Putin. Putin's listening to this, watching his president beat
He was
the beast.
KGB back in the day.
Well, he was KGB early on in the 80s. When he was in those conversations, actually, he was either the head of the FSB, the follow-on to the KGB, or the prime minister. But he's listening, and he's saying never again. So when Boris Yeltsin picked him to be president, when Putin took over, he knew who the enemy was. The enemy was the United States. He knew he knew what the problem was. The United States had built this entire. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was a Russian history major. I wrote a thesis on Russia. I studied Russia, spoke the language, and I worked in Russia for 2 years as a weapons inspector. I was considered a big deal in the Russian community. I got 2 classified commendations from the director of the CIA for my work in Russia. And so in 1993, I was recruited by the CIA to go to work as an analyst there. And I went and did the interview, and the head of the what they call it used to be SOVA, Soviet Area Analysis, but now it was OREO, Office of Russia and East European Studies, or something of this nature. We interviewed, we talked, and he said, "Well, you're clearly knowledgeable, but we don't want you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you're old. You think old. We need people who think new. You're tainted by the Soviet experience. You have this warmth in your heart for the Russian people. We want people who aren't thinking like you, who are looking at exploiting Russia, dominating Russia." And that's that's just the sad state of affairs. And so the people that they brought in aren't people who are trying to learn about Russia, know Russia, understand Russia. They're bringing in people to talk about exploiting Russia, et cetera. So that's the mindset of the United States. And Vladimir Putin comes in and says, "I'm not playing that game anymore." And so our policy from that point on became to kick Putin out of power. And to keep Russia going down. So that's what's going on. That's been going on since day one, 2000. Expanding NATO is key to that. Taking Ukraine out of the Russian sphere of influence is deemed to be essential. In 2008, there was a
real quick.
Go ahead.
Tell the people. Actually, we'll do, just so you guys know, Fresh has to run. So what we'll do is we'll do a quick little musical chairs. Do you mind, Scott? You can take a seat right here. Okay. And then, do a quick little switch over, guys, while we do that. And then we're going to continue on with this.
we do it live.
Yeah, we do it live.
Do you have the music?
Yeah, I switched it up. All right. My phone? Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Cool. All right, cool. So before we get into that, and make sure his sound levels are good and everything else like that. Before we get into that, could you tell the people what NATO is specifically and how it came about?
Sure. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's an alliance of nations that in the North Atlantic. I mean, it's European nations, the United States, Canada, that came together in the 1940s at the end of the Second World War to prevent the expansion of Soviet power into Europe. There was a fear that at the end of the war that the Soviet Union would seek to take advantage of the political turmoil, economic turmoil in Europe that was created by the Second World War, just destroyed nations, so to speak. We had the Marshall Plan in place.
Well, we were an ally with Russia in World War II, weren't we? To fight off the Nazis.
Correct, but here's the kicker here.
Yeah.
The war ends, and we have a defense industry that had been built up. Remember, before the war, we had a Great Depression.
Yes.
Our economy sort of was
in the 20s,
not doing the 30s.
Yeah, 30s. Sorry. Yes.
And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was trying to get us out of the Depression when World War II comes along. And so we build up our economy, we sort of recover from the war, but now the war's over.
Germany got out the Depression.
But if we go back to where we were, we'd have these economic problems. Plus, as part of the war, we took over the world economy. Mm-hmm. People don't understand. We didn't just go to help England. We destroyed England. We took away all their gold. We took away the French gold. We made the United States dollar the dominant currency in the world, Bretton Woods in 1944. And so when the war ends, there's people who are afraid about America going back to the isolationism that existed before the war. Mm-hmm. America has to stay involved. In order to stay involved, we have to have a threat. Mm. Enter the Soviet Union. They become the threat. Winston Churchill gives a speech in Fulton, Missouri, the Iron Curtain speech. It captured the imagination of the Americans. And so we create NATO to hold off a Soviet threat that, to be honest, didn't exist. The Soviet Union, people don't realize, suffered 27 million dead during the war.
World War II.
World War II. Their economy was destroyed. They were in the process of rebuilding. The last thing they want is another war.
Yeah.
But we created NATO. The first Secretary General of NATO, Lord Hastings, a Brit, said about NATO, he said, the purpose of NATO is to keep the Germans down, that is, to keep them suppressed, to keep the Russians out of Europe, and keep the Americans in. Meaning that if it weren't for NATO, America could go back to being sort of an isolationist country. Germany could rise up again, and then the Russians might feel a need to come in. So NATO was designed to do all of that. So that's why NATO was created. NATO expanded. We were fighting. We were worried about communism expanding, so we let the Greeks in. We let the Turks in. We expanded, but its focus again was primarily on containing Soviet power. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, or late 1991, early 1992, what was the purpose of NATO at that point?
Yeah.
And that was one of the big questions. When the Berlin Wall came down, one of the key issues that grasped Europe throughout the entire Cold War period was the fate of Germany. What would happen to Germany? It had been split, East and West Germany, the Soviets occupying East Germany, the Allies occupying West Germany. What was the future of Germany? If Germany came together, there was always this fear that this big Germany could become bad Germany again.
Yeah.
And so when the Berlin Wall collapsed and Germany started talking about reuniting, the Russians were a little nervous. The Soviets were a little nervous. They're saying, hey, we need a peace treaty. We haven't signed a peace treaty yet with Germany. We need to understand their future. And what about NATO? West Germany is a NATO country. If we withdraw, are you going to come in and it's going to be unacceptable if you put NATO into East Germany? And he was told by all the NATO leaders, NATO will not expand 1 inch eastward. That you withdraw your troops. There were 500,000 or 400,000 Soviet troops in East Germany. Withdraw your troops, and NATO won't expand 1 inch.
Because after World War II, we basically broke Germany in 3 parts, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or no, 4.
Well, Berlin was in 4 parts. Germany was in 4.
Yeah. Americans took a piece. The British took a piece. The Russians took a piece, and the French took a piece.
Yeah. And then the 3 pieces, the French, the British, the American piece, sort of were consolidated into West Germany. Mm-hmm. And then the Soviets had East Germany. Mm-hmm. So now the Soviets are going to withdraw, and we promised we wouldn't move NATO forces 1 inch eastward. James Baker, who made that promise, came back and briefed Papa Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush's national security team. They said, nah, not so fast. We're going to want to expand NATO because we got to keep the Russians down. So we lied to the Soviets. They withdrew. And then we've been expanding ever since. So in 2008, an ambassador named William Burns, today you might know him as the CIA director.
Okay.
But in 2008, he was the U.S. ambassador to Russia.
Yeah.
He wrote a memorandum called Net means net, no means no. And what he said is, if we invite Ukraine to join NATO, the Russians have said that's a red line. Yeah. And it will inevitably lead to a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And when did they predict this? This was back in
2008.
2008.
2008. And this was in April. So he said, don't. In November 2008, we invite Ukraine to join NATO. So please understand what I'm saying.
We had been invited them since back then?
We invited them in November of 2008. And
I thought they had been trying to join all this time and they couldn't get in because the country wasn't up to par on certain standards.
The invitation doesn't mean to join immediately. It means we begin the process. We begin the map of, the roadmap of, and all the things that happen. But basically it says, we want you to become a member. And the Russians are like,
what the hell?
Yeah, no. No. No means no.
Yeah.
What part of that don't you understand?
Yeah.
And then in 2014, we carry out a coup in Kiev to kick out the pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, who was constitutionally elected, and we replace him with these Ukrainian nationalists who are from a party called Svoboda Party, the right sector. Now, let me explain what that is.
Mm-hmm.
They're a minority politically in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Their roots, they worship a guy named Stepan Bandera.
Okay.
Stepan Bandera was a Ukrainian nationalist from the 1930s, 1940s. He collaborated with Adolf Hitler. Bandera's forces, when they went into, when Germany invaded Poland and then invaded Russia, went in and they murdered 30 to 40,000 Jews. They killed 110,000 Poles. They slaughtered 220,000 Russians because they view all of them as subhuman.
These are Ukrainian nationalists.
These are Ukrainian nationalists, and Stepan Bandera is their leader.
Okay.
He's collaborating with the Germans. Now, as the Russians...
Was Ukraine not its own... Well, I guess it was a part of the Soviet Union, but it was still its own nation, so to speak. They looked at themselves as, we're not Russian, we're Ukrainian. If
you go back, and I mean, this is where it gets controversial about, when did Ukraine happen? The Russian perspective is that Ukraine was an artificial state created by the Soviets, created by Lenin. And they created this artificial state. The Ukrainians are going to say, no, our heritage goes back further than that, et cetera. But here's the thing. The Ukrainian nationalists of Stepan Bandera are people from what we call today Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine at one time was part of Poland.
Okay.
So if actually when Stepan Bandera began his Ukrainian nationalism, it was because the part of the Western Ukraine that we call Western Ukraine today, I think it's Volhynia or something like that, was part of Poland.
Gotcha.
But
he still killed his own people, essentially.
No, because the Ukrainians are different than the Poles.
Okay.
He viewed the Poles as subhuman.
Okay, as enemies. Okay.
Not just enemies. I use subhuman for a reason.
Yeah. Because
these are the ultimate white supremacists are the Ukrainians. These are the original master race.
Gotcha.
They hate the Jews.
Yeah.
They hate the Poles. They hate the Russians. So when Germany comes in, they ally themselves with the Germans, and they're fighting. Now the Soviets are starting to counterattack. So as they push their way through what is called Ukraine, these Banderist groups stay behind as sort of insurgents, and they're controlled by the Germans. So as the Germans retreat, they have these stay behind guys. They're collecting intelligence. They're blowing up bridges. And this was a group, an organization known as the Gehlen Network. Gehlen was the name of the German general who commanded this intelligence apparatus. When the war ended, the United States captured Gehlen. Now, he's a Nazi responsible for the deaths of many people. Should have been put in prison, should have been hung by the neck until dead. But Gehlen said, but I have a network of spies and still operating inside the Soviet Union. And we went, oh, sit down at the table. You're our friend now. And we brought him in, and we controlled him, and we controlled them. And we used them from the very beginning to attack the Russians, to destabilize the Russians, et cetera. So we used these Banderist rebels, these insurgents, to attack the Soviets. And we fought the CIA fought a covert war from 1945 until 1953, 50. And like I said, hundreds of thousands of Russians were killed. 48,000 Russian soldiers were killed during this. So it's a big war. It's not a little war.
So this has been going on since the 50s,
40s. But in the 50s, the Soviets finally beat them. Hundreds of thousands of them,
Ukrainian nationalists,
the Banderists.
Okay.
The
audience is tracking here,
right.
Guys. You got to stay on point and pay attention.
They flee. They go to places like Germany, England, Canada, the United States. I already told you that Stepan Bandera is a murderer. The CIA itself in its documents say this is one of the worst people we've ever met in our lives.
Responsible for killing Jewish people, Polish people, Russians, everybody, in the name of Ukrainian nationalism.
60 miles from my town. I live in upstate New York, outside of Albany.
Okay.
60 miles from my town where I live is a town called Ellenville, New York.
Okay.
In Ellenville, New York, there's a park called Heroes Park.
Okay.
Heroes Park has 5 statues of Ukrainian nationalists, one of which is Stepan Bandera.
Wow.
Every summer, Ukrainian banderists get together wearing their Nazi uniforms, and they parade around their nice little blonde hair, blue-eyed Aryan race. They carry portraits of Stepan Bandera. They sing songs glorifying Stepan Bandera. It's alive and well living in America, in Canada, everywhere. They've been embedded in the United States since the 50s, 60s, 70s to this day. The CIA continued to fund this operation from 1954 until 1990. And at that point in time, in 1990, they stopped funding it because the nationalists were back in power. We put them in power in the government in 2014. The first thing the nationalists did is they outlawed the Russian language. They passed a law banning Russian culture. And then when the Russians pushed back, they declared an anti-terrorism operation, and they declared all the ethnic Russians to be terrorists. And they began attacking them. In May of 2014, there was a demonstration of pro-Russians in the city of Odessa. The Banderists shoved 150 of them into a building, the trade union building, set it on fire, and cheered as people burned to death, jumped out of the building. Anybody who jumped out and survived, they shot on the ground. Wow. And then they marched on the Crimea. People are like, you keep hearing people go, the little green men, Putin is little green men. You want to know why the little green men went into Crimea? To stop the Banderas from coming in and doing the same thing to the Russians in Crimea. Oh. So he stopped it and he said, we're not playing this game. Crimea belongs to us. End of story. So then they shifted up and they went to Mariupol. You might remember that name, the fighting.
Real quick, just because this is something real quick. Guys, like the goddamn video. This is something that came up a lot back in 2014, right? Where people say, "Oh, Russia invaded Ukraine," blah blah blah. So the real reason why they invaded is because these Ukrainian nationalists, the Banderas, were killing innocent Russians, 100%. Ethnic Russians, in Crimea. So that's why Russia invaded.
Well, they started in Odessa. Now they went to Crimea. Russia invaded Crimea to take it back and say, "No, you're not going to kill Russians."
To stop them from what they did in Odessa.
Right, but then they moved up to Mariupol. Now, we all know Mariupol from the fighting that took place there last year, the heavy fighting in Mariupol, Azovstal, and all that, the Azov battalion, and this. Well, Mariupol, the Banderas went in there and started literally raping, murdering, terrorizing the ethnic Russians. So the ethnic Russians started to organize into these militia units to defend themselves. And then,
sorry, yeah, no, you good, yeah,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then, and that's how this war began. So the Russians intervened. People talk about Wagner. You hear about Wagner today, Prigozhin and all that. Wagner was created in 2014 by the Russian government to provide assistance to the pro-Russian ethnic Russians that were defending themselves against the Nazis. Okay. That's how Wagner was created.
And is that like a law, or what is it specifically?
Well, the thing is, because Wagner is a Wagner Group, the private military contractors, the mercenary organization that Yevgeny Prigozhin heads, the guy who just launched the coup against
Putin's right-hand guy. They call him the chef.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, that was his private army. Well, he was given the responsibility of building this army, because the reason why is that even though we call these people pro-Russian ethnic Russians, it's still Ukraine. Yes.
Lugansk and Donetsk, the Donbass, are Ukraine.
Yeah.
And by law, Russia can't put Russian soldiers on that territory without permission of the Russian parliament, and they weren't giving Putin permission.
Okay.
So the only way that Putin could give military assistance was for Wagner to create a mercenary army. And so then the military assistance came in. So that's how that army was created, to provide assistance.
So was that army originally created to protect innocent Russians
from the Nazis?
From the Nazis that lived in.
Yes.
Wow.
Now here's the thing: they did a really good job. And by 2014, they had the Ukrainian army surrounded, and they were going to kill them all. And that's when the Germans and the French came in and said, "Please, Mr. Putin, don't kill all the Ukrainian soldiers. Please don't do that.
Don't kill these Nazis.
Don't kill the Nazis. Let's have a ceasefire. We'll call it the Minsk Accords, a ceasefire agreement. And you'll let the Ukrainian army live, and then we will get the Ukrainian government to agree to this terms where we'll protect the rights of the Russians. We won't kill the Russians. We'll do all that.
Yeah.
And Putin went, okay, I'll agree to that.
At this point, and not to stop you, in 2014, they were getting sanctioned, weren't they? Didn't Obama sanction them at this point?
Yeah, they sanctioned the Russians for Crimea. Yeah,
for invading into Crimea.
And they're also sanctioned for helping the ethnic Russians defend themselves against the Nazis.
Yeah. So I want y'all to know that too, because that's important, because I think that's a big reason why Putin, the sanctions aren't messing them up now. They prepared themselves for the sanctions that came in 2022.
Well, let me put it this way. If I told you that, I'm coming over to your house and I'm going to kick your butt.
Yep.
We're going to box.
Yep.
You'd say, well, I'm going to the gym. I'm going to get a trainer. I'm going to practice boxing. And I keep talking how I'm going to come over here and kick your butt. Yep. But all I'm doing is talking.
Yeah.
I'm going to come over and kick your butt. You're training, you're boxing. Now I show up, knock on your door. I'm going to kick your butt, and you kick my butt because you've been training, you've been ready to box. Yeah. I've been running my mouth.
Yeah.
The United States has been going sanction. And the Russians are like, okay.
Yeah. We know it's coming. So they pretty much created their infrastructure.
They beat us. But
continue on. So you were saying, so the Minsk agreements. I'm sorry.
So the Minsk Accords comes in. Now here's the deal. There's a ceasefire, stop the war, it saved the Ukrainian army. Mm-hmm. The deal with Minsk was that Donbass would still be part of Ukraine. They tried to separate. The ethnic Russians voted for independence in 2014 and begged the Russians to take them in. Mm-hmm. And Putin said no. He said, you're part of Ukraine. Oh, wow. We will defend your rights, but we're not going to split Ukraine up. A lot of people don't realize that.
I didn't know that.
That Putin didn't want to split up Ukraine. All he wanted was to protect the rights of the ethnic Ukrainians. So,
why didn't he want to take them in?
Because you can't get into it's not taking them in. You can't get into the business of redrawing the map of Europe. That's a messy thing. Once you start changing the borders, you undo the stability that World War II was trying to engender. Okay. And Putin believed in that. Look, Putin believes in Russians. In 2005, he gave a speech to the Russian Federal Assembly, their Congress, and it's a speech that's been misrepresented a lot. People say, Vladimir Putin wants the Soviet Union to come back, and I'm like, well, why do you say that? Because he gave a speech. I said, yeah, but listen to the speech. He said, one of the greatest catastrophes of the last century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. Now, the people have twisted to say the greatest calamity was the collapse. So they're saying, see, he regrets the Soviet Union collapse, and that means he wants it to come back. I said, wait, there's more. Mm-hmm. Listen to what he says. Because overnight, tens of millions of Russians became homeless.
Yeah.
People who used to live in the Soviet Union overnight lived in a foreign country. Russians were now in Ukraine. Russians were in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Uzbekistan. Russians no longer have a home.
Yeah.
And they were abused. And he said, I am the president of the Russian nation. Mm-hmm. And the Russian nation is larger than the Russian Federation. The Russian nation are the people with common language, common culture, common heritage, common religion. Yeah. He said, my job is to defend them all. Mm-hmm. And so now we get to the Donbass. His job is to defend them.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're going to break up the Ukraine. What it means is you're going to defend the Russians. So he did. He created Wagner. He went to war. They won. Now there's a ceasefire. All that has to happen is the Ukrainians have to sign the deal. They wouldn't. They kept delaying.
The Minsk agreements.
Yeah.
They wouldn't sign them.
No. They kept delaying. They wouldn't implement them.
What was outlined in the Minsk agreements that kept them from signing?
Well, peace. That's the problem. No, I'll get to it in a second because this is a big deal.
Please. Yeah.
What the Russians guaranteed is that they would respect the borders, that they would withdraw all the forces would withdraw behind the borders, that it would be demilitarized, mm-hmm. but that the Ukrainians would have to withdraw their own troops from the Donbass and then pass laws that protected the linguistic, cultural, religious rights of the Russians living there, mm-hmm. so that they could speak Russian, they could celebrate Russian history, they could celebrate Russian culture. Ukrainians wouldn't change those laws. And the reason why is this, and we now know, Petro Poroshenko was the president of Ukraine at the time. After Putin invaded Ukraine, people asked him about Minsk. He said, the Minsk agreements, they were a sham. We were never going to implement them. We were just using them to buy time so that NATO could rebuild the Ukrainian army. Mm-hmm. Remember that Ukrainian army that Putin had surrounded?
Yeah.
It was going to destroy?
Yeah.
and let it go
Yeah.
because he wanted peace,
Yeah.
because Putin wanted peace,
Yeah.
because Putin wanted peace, because Putin wanted peace.
Yeah.
All these people today, Putin started as, I'm trying to tell people right now, Putin is the only person that wanted peace. He is the one, he could have destroyed the Ukrainian army back in 2014. He could have imposed his will on that area, but he chose peace. He was the only one serious about peace. Now, Petro Poroshenko was admitting it was the Ukrainians were never going to sign it. It was a sham. But it's not just that. The Germans and the French that went begging to Putin, Angela Merkel has talked about it, the hardest 48 hours of her life where she did the shuttle diplomacy, begging Putin to agree to this, to go with this. So Putin did it. She has said, yeah, the whole purpose of that was just to buy time so we could build up the Ukrainian army.
Wow.
Francois Hollande, the French president, the same thing. Most Americans don't realize in 2015, we opened up a U.S. training mission in Ukraine. The job of the U.S. training mission was to train 1 battalion of Ukrainian forces every 55 days for the sole purpose of going eastwards to kill Russians. That's it. We trained them to kill Russians. We were never interested in peace.
2014.
2015.
2015. And a battalion is roughly
500, 600 men.
Yeah.
So we did that from 2015 to 2021 or 22. That was our job. Not to create peace, but to train a Ukrainian army to kill Russians in the Donbass. Zelensky ran on a platform in 2019 to be president of Ukraine.
What tactical advantage or benefit do they derive from controlling the Donbass?
Well, first,
Crimea, I can see because it's right there on the water. You have access to the sea. But why the Donbass?
The Donbass is the heart of the Russian economy, the heart of the Soviet economy. It's where the coal mines are. It's where the steel mills are. It's basically the industrial heartland of Russia. Is that it's a Russian territory that was given to Ukraine by Joseph Stalin so that Ukraine would have some sort of economic viability, because without the Donbass, Ukraine is just a bunch of farmers.
Gotcha.
The Donbass is what gives them.
So are the resources shared between Russia and Ukraine from the Donbass?
No, the Donbass, the resources belong to Ukraine. That's
okay.
Well, not now. Now they belong to Russia.
Yeah.
But but again, Putin was willing to let
them have it, but they were killing the Russians. That's why he had to
That's why he had to stop.
Okay.
So in 2019, Zelensky's running for president saying, I want peace. I want to bring about peace. I want peace with Russia. He was elected president because the Russian population of Ukraine said, we'll vote for you because we believe that you'll bring us peace.
Let me ask you this, because people have criticized you and said, you're a puppet for the Russian propaganda machine. You're just pro-Putin. You're just saying all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. It's a bunch of BS, blah, blah, blah. What's your response to all the people out there that say that you're a Putin puppet by saying what you're saying, but saying like, oh, Putin wanted peace or whatever? What's your response to that? Because I agree with you that he wanted peace, but I want to see what's your thoughts on the people that hate and say, oh, he's just a Putin puppet. He's just saying all this crap.
Well,
criticisms.
You and I had a long conversation about Iraq.
Yeah.
Am I a Saddam puppet?
No.
I think I just answered your question.
There you go. For all the
I'm a
haters.
fact-based person.
Yeah.
I'll just say this.
I mean, I think the other thing too, just using common sense, if Putin didn't want peace, he could have destroyed Ukraine in one day, guys.
That quick.
Like, come on, man. For all the people out there like saying he doesn't want peace, he literally could have destroyed Ukraine in one fucking day.
I'm probably one of the few people that you talk to that spent the first part of their adult life training to kill Russians. I spent 2.5 years in 29 Palms, California, 24/7, perfecting the art of killing Russians. I went to bed every night praying for war. I wanted to kill Russians.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to call me a Putin fucking puppet? Eat shit and die. Excuse my language, but you know what? I have no time for people like that. I'm a Russian expert.
Mm-hmm.
Before you call me a Putin puppet, challenge me on my facts, challenge me on my knowledge, challenge me on why I take the position I do. I don't take the position because I'm pro-Putin. I take the position because I'm pro-fucking peace.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't understand what I have done in my life to stop war, to prevent war, you know, in the lead up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, I bent over backwards to stop a war. A lot of people don't know that I traveled to Iraq and spoke before the Iraqi parliament. I'm the only foreigner to ever do that. It was a petition to the Iraqi parliament to let UN weapons inspectors back in as a precondition to stopping the war. I came back and people said, you're a Saddam stooge and all blah, blah. Saddam let the inspectors back in because of what I did. And I'm a fucking Saddam stooge. You just had a note from a guy who talked about being a paraplegic, going to Afghanistan, went to war on a bunch of lies. I was trying to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
If you don't understand that, you don't understand jack shit. I'm getting a little angry right now because I just despise.
No, let them know. Let them know, because a lot of the haters say that shit.
You know, you want to come at me with facts. You call me a Putin puppet, you better know how to fucking spell Russia first, asshole. All right? You better understand the context of everything I'm saying. If you're going to challenge me on the facts. Tell me that Volodymyr Zelensky, didn't hold a war council shortly after he was elected president where he said, our policy is war, war, war. I got a fucking video that has him saying that. And you're going to say that Putin's the warmonger? He's the only one who wanted peace. The Minsk Accords is something he tried to have implemented the entire time. It's not Putin that said it's a sham. It's not Putin. It was Merkel, Hollande, Poroshenko. Putin wanted it implemented, even when they pulled out of the Minsk Accords in the fall of 2021. Putin's step wasn't to go to war. It was to put draft treaties in place, an appeal to NATO and the United States. Please, one last negotiated chance to end this. Let's not go to war. Let's have a negotiation. The United States and NATO refused to consider this. Even when they did that, he went back to Zelensky and sent negotiating teams saying, come on, we don't want to go to war. Let's find a solution. Let's find a solution. Zelensky led him on. All the while, they were taking that NATO-trained army and positioning it to invade. They were scheduled to invade the Donbass in March. Putin preempted it with his invasion. By the way, under international law, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, self-defense, international law talks about preemptive self-defense, which is what Putin did. Preemptive self-defense. He didn't violate any law. It's not a war of aggression. Preemptive self-defense. And what did he do after he invaded? The whole purpose of the invasion was to get the Ukrainians back to the negotiating table. That's all Putin wanted to do. Get them to negotiate. And it almost worked. They had 3 meetings in Gomel, Belarus in early March. Why? Because the Russians scared the living crap out of Zelensky with their invasion.
Yep.
So they sent the team in, they negotiated. They had a treaty ready to sign on 1 April. Ladies and gentlemen, just think about this for a second. The Ukrainians initialed the treaty. They signed the treaty. We know now because Putin actually brought the documents up, showed it to the African peace delegation that came in and said, why aren't you negotiating with the Ukrainians? He said, guys, we've been trying to negotiate from day one. They aren't serious about it. They signed this treaty. We were ready to sign it. The United States and Great Britain told Zelensky, don't.
Wow.
Because we want to send you billions of dollars of military aid to continue this war. Over 350,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died.
That's what the casualties are at now? 300,000?
350,000.
350,000.
About 310,000 of them.
Where does that number come from for the people? Because I know they're going to ask, where does that number come from?
Well, the number comes from the Ukrainians who are acknowledging
big
numbers
from Ukrainians themselves.
Well, I mean, the numbers come from crunching the data.
Okay.
The Ukrainians have for long said they haven't suffered many, but now they're coming out saying we've suffered more dead than you can possibly imagine. They won't give a number to it. But if you run the numbers, if you run the battles, if you talk to the mothers, people have gone in and the families are saying, where's my husband? Where's my son? Also, the missing, et cetera. The numbers come up to around 350,000.
Okay.
We know that Yevgeny Prigozhin's
bare minimum 350.
Yeah, because there's missing and things of that. Prigozhin, who we talk about, Wagner, in the battle for Bakhmut earlier this year, they've killed 75,000, and that's counted bodies. 75,000 Ukrainians physically counted by them. So that's a lot. They just killed 13,000 Ukrainians at the first 2.5 weeks of this counteroffensive, counted bodies. So these are big numbers, guys, a lot of numbers. And the point I'm trying to make is they would all be alive today.
Yeah.
If we had allowed that peace treaty to be signed. And the peace treaty that Putin was going for was basically just to say, look, the Donbass is independent. You guys blew it. We can't let it go back to you. They're Russians. They're going to be independent. Crimea is ours.
Yep.
But everything else goes back to you. You can't join NATO, but we will allow you to have security guarantees from the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. We'll guarantee you security. That's all we want.
Wow.
The Ukrainians signed
pretty fair terms.
Well, especially when you look what happened today. But the Ukrainians walked away, and since they've been in a war, I just want to remind people, because of the decisions made by the United States in pressuring Ukraine to not go along with this peace treaty, there are hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians that are dead who otherwise would be alive. There are tens of millions of Ukrainians who have been displaced from their homes, who otherwise would have a home, be living a normal life. Think of all the children who aren't going to school now, who are refugees, whose lives are displaced, who have lost their fathers. Every one of those dead men is a potential father,
brother,
uncle, gone
friend,
in their lives, finished, gone forever. There, $1 trillion of infrastructure damage has been done to their country, all because the United States wouldn't allow Ukraine to make peace with Russia. Russia's not the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Russia's not the problem. Russia wants peace. Russia's been seeking peace. It's the United States. And now here's the sickest part of all. You've heard the name George Soros. I know everybody's talked about George Soros. Probably can't use that name, get in trouble. But in 1993, George Soros wrote a paper that talked about how NATO is supposed to deal with Russia. And he said, we need to avoid a direct war between NATO and Russia at all costs. Why? Because there'll be NATO body bags that come home, and that's always a bad look.
Yeah.
What they need to do, he said, is come up with a situation where you have Eastern European manpower that's been lured into believing they're going to be part of NATO, but they'll never be allowed to join NATO. And we marry them with NATO technology and use them to inflict pain on Russia. Eastern European manpower, Ukraine, lured into believing they're going to be NATO, but never going to be allowed. 2008, inviting them in, but never let marrying them with NATO technology, tens of billions of dollars of NATO technology to bring pain to Russia. 1993, George Soros put that in place. That's the policy that we have today. That's exactly the policy. We are all these people who put the little Ukrainian flag on your on social media, the virtue
Ukraine,
signaling, all this stuff. Understand that all you're doing is killing them. We don't care about Ukraine. If we did, we would never allow hundreds of thousands of them to die in a war that they can't win. All we're using them to do is inflict pain on Russia. And this is a plan that's been in place since 1993.
Bro. For all the people out there, right, that are saying, oh, he's a Putin puppet, propaganda, blah, 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 blah. I mean, do you guys have these facts? I don't think a lot of the detractors do, man. They're just going to sit there and say some bullshit or make ad hominem attacks versus.
They won't debate. Here's the other thing too. My uncle fought in World War II.
Yeah.
He went over Normandy Beach, not on D-Day. A lot of people realize that the Normandy Beach became a supply route. So I think he came over on D+6.
Yeah.
He was in a supply unit. He's not a hero. He's not a frontline hero. His job was to run trucks up and down what they call the Red Ball Express. And he did that, took the trucks in, helped move George Patton's army up through France and all that stuff. And around in October of 1944, in Belgium, his unit, a company, made a left-hand turn on a farmer's field, and German 88s opened up, and within a span of a minute and a half, killed 250 of his friends.
Wow!
All around him, boom, 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 dead. Mel Babcock is his name. Well, he's dead now. Mel Babcock finished the war, went back to Kellogg, Michigan, worked in the Kellogg factory. He made cornflakes of all things. Quiet, unassuming man. He came and visited my family when we lived in Germany in 1977. And he was dying of cancer at the point. He was a smoker, but he still had his health. But he wanted to come back and see the battlefield. So we drove him through Europe, and we took him. And as you're going through France, he's just all like, oh, I remember this village. I remember we came here. The women came out to meet us, da-da-da-da. But when you get up to Belgium, he got quiet. And when we turned around that road, he got out of the car and he broke down and cried. Grown man, bawling like a baby because he remembered what happened there. We then went to the cemetery. There's a big national military cemetery in Luxembourg, and went there. And that's where George Patton is buried. And there are tens of thousands of crosses of dead American soldiers. And we went there and we found the graves of his friends, and he went to each one of them and, had a private conversation with them, but crying the whole time. I was, 16 years old when that happened, and it impacted me deeply. I lived in Germany, but watching the cost of that war to my uncle, what it did to my uncle, I realized how evil Nazi Germany was. I traveled to the concentration camps. I saw them. I started to educate myself about it. And while I like the Germans, I love the Germans. They're good people. Their cultures, who doesn't like to drink beer and eat schnitzel and all that kind of stuff? But at the end of the day, I realized that they had a dark history.
Yeah.
The Nazi Germany could never be allowed to rear its ugly head. And my uncle is up above looking down at me saying, never forget.
Yeah.
Never forget. Ladies and gentlemen, we're allowing Nazis to come back into power in Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is a government that has made Stepan Bandera, that guy we talked about earlier, he's their national hero.
Yeah.
They sing songs to him. They name streets after him. They put statues on him. They have his tattoos. They had a Bandera unit called the Dillwigger unit. They have crossed hammers as their sign. These are the guys that raped Jewish women, hit them with skulls. They ran the concentration camps. These are mass murderers. They specialized in herding villagers into a barn and setting it on fire and then drinking while they burned to death. And anybody who managed to come out of the building, they shoot them down with a machine gun. This is what they did for fun. And these are the people that said Slava Ukraina as they murdered the people. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Glory to Ukraine. Nancy Pelosi said Slava Ukraina in the American Congress. Does she not understand that that is the exact equivalent of Sig Heil? Imagine if I went into the Congress, stood up and went, Sig Heil.
Yeah.
People go, what the hell are you doing, you Nazi? Well, what is she doing? Saying Slava Ukraina, because that is a Nazi war cry of the Ukrainian nationalists who murdered people on behalf.
And that's her people too.
Yes.
That's her people.
Thank you for bringing that up. My uncle's up there looking down saying, And you know what? There's a lot of Americans who have uncles and fathers, grandfathers who are looking down saying, we're ignoring them. We've turned our back on our history. We went to war. And remember, we went to war with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany. I just came from Russia. I'm telling you right now that there's not a Russian family that didn't suffer. My wife is from Georgia, Republic of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Her father passed away recently, and he left a memoir. So we're having that memoir. It was handwritten, so we're having it transcribed. And she's reading it, and she just came to me and she said, I just came to the section about my family in World War II. I lost 5 relatives. And she went through all the relatives. They were 18 years old, 19 years old, all the relatives that were lost. Mm-hmm. Her family lost 5 people dead in the war. Mm-hmm. That's just one family.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire Soviet Union, every family lost people. There's not a family that wasn't touched by this.
Yeah.
And they remember. They don't forget. They wake up every morning, and those people are above them, staring down, saying, don't forget what happened. Don't disgrace our sacrifice. And so you say, what is motivating the Russians to fight in Ukraine today? They're fighting Nazis. Mm-hmm. They're fighting Nazis. And when Americans go over there and provide assistance, we're helping Nazis. Mm-hmm. And we know it. Even the New York Times can't hide it anymore. They're sitting there taking photographs. Look at if
you look at the people surrounding Zelensky,
they got Nazi symbols.
Yeah.
Look at the tanks that we give them. They put the Nazi cross on it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. For people out there that might say, well, Zelensky, right, is Jewish. Why is he surrounded by Nazis? Why are Nazis protecting him? What's your answer for that?
Study the concentration camps. Mm-hmm. And there's a class of people called capo.
Okay.
They're the guys that they were collaborators with the Nazis. They're the ones that kept the Jews in the camps under order. They're the ones that lined them up, took the roll call. They got extra food, extra benefits. They were Jews. Mm. The capos helped the Nazis kill the Jews.
Wow.
So it's a phenomena.
Wow.
Zelensky is a disgrace to every Jew that is alive today. Many rabbis have called him out on it. They've said, you're a disgrace. Israeli rabbis have said, you're a disgrace. You're the least Jewish.
Can he go to Israel if he wanted to?
He could, but yeah. I mean, I'm actually thinking that his wife has already bought property in Israel.
Yeah.
So
because I looked at it like, to me, just off of him not wanting to make peace, him not wanting to come to the table with Putin, in my head, I'm like, why is he not? But then I think about it. Wait, he's a billionaire now because of the war. He has a house here in Miami. He's perfectly safe. Nothing's going to happen to him. So does he really care about Ukraine? I don't think so. It doesn't look like it to me.
It's a question only he can answer. I don't imagine as a president you could claim to care about a country that you're destroying.
Yeah.
And knowing that you can't save it. Knowing that every day that goes by, all you're doing. Look, he's a guy that has to know that George Soros's plan is coming into play, that he's being used as a tool, that we're sacrificing East European manpower to hurt Russia.
What's George Soros' beef with Russia?
Again, that's a question only George Soros can answer. I think his whole thing is world government, and he needs to. The Russians have always stood up against the the kind of globalism that
George
Soros and others have been putting in play.
Yeah. Wow. All right, I'll hit some of these chats. Guys, like the video, man. You guys are getting a lot of heat right now. We got Rams goes, what did Zelensky really mean when he said he wants Ukraine to be Israel 2.0? Did he say that?
What he means by that is he wants the security of Israel. He wants to have the level of security that Israel has. He wants the Iron Dome. He wants American protection, things of that nature. He wants to make Ukraine so powerful that its neighbors won't dare to attack it. But what he doesn't understand is Israel's attacked every day because their neighbors hate them.
Yeah.
That Israel has become a hated part of the Middle East, and that security is in name only. Israel has all this wonderful weaponry, all this security, but they're miserable. Look, again, short story. I first went to Israel in 1994, and from 1994 to 1998, I traveled to Israel many, many, many times. Every time I went to Israel, without exception, there was a major terrorist attack or a major incident in Lebanon, something where a lot of Israelis died.
Biggest police state in the world.
But I'll say this, the Israelis that I worked with cried when the thing happened. Then they got up and they went to work. And many of them went to work for peace. I said, well, how could you have peace with the Palestinians? I said, we have to have peace with the Palestinians. We have to find a way. I'm not saying that everything they did was right. I'm just saying that their mentality was this. I went back in 2010 with my wife, and we toured, I think maybe 2009, late 2009. But we toured Israel, changed country, totally changed country. Mm-hmm. Fear. The fear that exists was palpable. They built a wall separating them from the Palestinians. It is literally apartheid. They made a Palestinian ghetto. Wow. I mean, imagine you being the Israelis and the Israeli nation that claims to be born so that it never again will happen, meaning never again will the Jewish people be rounded up and put into concentration camps. Many of the people who created Israel were survivors of apartheid, survivors of the ghettos. They come in, and what have they done? They've emulated the tactics of the Nazis.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling.
Wow. We got here, Trevon Suki goes, so what do puppeteers, U.S. and NATO, get out of this instead of making peace and entering/maintaining trade with Russia? That's a good question. What do we get out of continuing this war? There's a lot of things I could think of, but I'll let you talk about it.
Well, let's remember
what are the benefits.
Let's start and understand that NATO has been an institution looking for a mission after the end of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. They call themselves a defensive alliance, yet they've carried out wars of aggression against Libya, against Serbia, and in Afghanistan. So they're not a peaceful defensive alliance. They're an aggressive war-making machine, and they failed. You know, we've forgotten. Do you remember August of 2021? What happened in August of 2021? The American withdrawal from Kabul.
Yeah. That was an L. One of the biggest black eyes in the Biden administration.
In American history.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just America. NATO withdrew.
Yeah.
And we misled NATO. We kept telling NATO that we're going to stay. We're doubling down. We're never leading. Remember, generals always went up to Congress saying, we can't leave Afghanistan. Yeah. We have to fight them over there to make sure we don't fight them here. It's essential we stay there all the way up until the end. And suddenly we went, we're done. We're out of there.
Yeah.
And the NATO's going, what? We've committed everything to this and you abandoned us. So now NATO is in a panic mode because they're questioning why they exist, and they're questioning, is America a trustworthy ally?
Yeah.
So ask yourself, why are we in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Because we had to create a new conflict to justify the continuation of NATO, to make America relevant to NATO. We needed this war. We made this war. No one else but us.
Not to mention, we're able to test our weaponry. We're able to test logistics. We're able to test how to transport. Like, there's so many benefits to the United States being in this war, because it allows us to basically try everything out with not too much risk to ourselves. I mean, the Ukrainians are fighting the war. We're giving them all the supplies.
But here's the bad thing.
Yeah.
We're losing.
Yeah, we are losing big
time.
I
mean, we're grinding through all our stuff. We don't have any stuff left to give them. And here's the other thing too.
After this, I was going to ask you about like how how the Russians have beat us, like from a war strategy standpoint, how they've been able to beat us. After this, sorry, continue.
Well, no, we'll because I'll answer it when we go. So we'll start with how the Russians have have beat us.
Yeah, how they invaded in and how they've tactically taken land and space.
Again, when the Russians first went into Ukraine, the special military operation,
that's what they call it.
I work.
And real quick, so the people know this, because you mentioned a great tidbit earlier, which I think kind of might have got overlooked by the audience. You mentioned that Ukrainians had surrounded, if I'm not mistaken, Odessa, right? These Nazis, and Putin invaded, and they had a plan for March, and Putin invaded in February preemptively before they can invade.
Right. The Ukrainians had built this.
That's why they invaded in February.
This NATO-trained army that Ukraine had built up, 260,000 strong. They had moved 60 to 90,000 of them into the Ukrainian-occupied Donbass.
I'm sorry.
And they were getting ready to launch an invasion to take over the rest of Donbass in March.
And that's why Putin invaded
preempted
in February, because he had that intelligence and knew they were going to do that. So for everybody thinking like, what the hell did he do? He had to.
The first phase, though, as I said, was to get the Ukrainians back to the negotiating table.
Okay. Of this military operation when they invaded.
Right, when they invaded. It wasn't designed to kill Zelensky, to capture Kiev, to do this. It was an invasion designed to put pressure on Ukraine to get them to negotiate, and it worked. Now, they signed, remember I told you they initialed that document.
Yeah.
What did the Russians do when the Ukrainians initialed the document? They withdrew from Kiev. They withdrew from Sumy, from Chernihiv. They pulled back because it was a good faith measure, because they were trying to convince, they told Zelensky, we're serious. We don't want to occupy your territory. So you signed it in a good faith gesture. We're going to pull back. And the
Western media didn't report that.
No, they said Russians are retreating.
Yeah.
and so that's why Boris Johnson came in and said, oh, no. Got to keep this war going. See, the Russians are retreating. And the Ukrainians are like, well, they sort of promised, shh, the Russians are retreating. You've beaten them. We're going to give you more weapons, and we're going to get you back on track to retake the Donbass. So now the Ukrainians are stuck in a war. The Russians, meanwhile, are going, damn it, now what do we do? Because we thought we were going to have this negotiated settlement. So Russia said, okay, we're going to go to phase two. Phase two was to take over the Donbass, secure their position in Kherson and Zaporizhia, the land bridge connecting Russia with Crimea. And that's all they wanted.
Is there a map that shows this by chance, so we can show the people visually that you could think of? Maybe we could pull it up on Google.
Yeah, if you just Google
Ukraine,
Rybar.
Type in Ukraine map, and we'll pull it up so we can give the people a visual. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Scott.
But so they start this, and this is where Wagner becomes a big player now, because now Wagner's told to expand their force into a division-sized unit to.
And for the audience, Wagner is a mercenary group created by one of Putin's right-hand men to kind of circumvent certain laws in place that does not allow Russian soldiers to go into Ukraine, but they had to protect their people. So that's how they were able to get around it. Correct? If I'm not mistaken.
No, you're right.
Okay.
So there's the map.
Zoom in a bit more, Mo.
I don't know. Can I? If I?
Yeah. You go.
See if I point.
Yeah, point to it real quick, and then Mo will show it on the.
All right. So this is where the Russians were here. They pulled back here. They pulled.
Okay, Mo, go up to the top where it shows Kiev. See, right? Put the mouse where Kiev is. Right there. Boom. Yep. And then, okay, so that's Kiev right there.
So they
and then grab your mic real quick, Scott, and then kind of
So they pulled back here and here. They still had their forces down here, and then down in this area here.
Shit, I don't think the people could see.
But the point is, in the east, the Russians had now they were going to be pushing west more, and so they started this war. But they didn't have enough troops.
Yeah, there you go. Twist it.
They didn't have enough troops. This was the problem. They started the war with only 180 to 200,000 troops.
Okay.
So now they didn't get the peace treaty they wanted. But here's the deal. See, you and I talked about sanctions.
Yeah.
Well, Putin didn't really know what the impact was. He was still worried about sanctions. Like, what is the impact on his economy?
Back in 2014.
No, 2022.
Oh, okay.
Because people are, the big question people have is, well, why did he go in with so few troops? Well, because his goal wasn't to invade. His goal was to intimidate into a peace treaty.
Okay.
But now that NATO said, no, we're going to give you tens of billions of dollars of equipment, the Russians now had to fight a war. So they began fighting this war against to secure the Donbass, to take control of all the Donbass and secure this land bridge to Crimea.
And that is the Donbass is northeast.
Right. It's in the northern part. Then you go down across the Sea of Azov down to Crimea.
Yeah.
So they're
Pull up the
fighting.
map real quick, Mo, and highlight that area for the people so they kind of understand. But continue. You can keep talking while he pulls it up.
So that becomes phase 2 of the operation. But he didn't enlarge the army, and this is the problem. And people say, well, why didn't he? There's 2 reasons why. Because he was concerned about the economy. The sanctions were hurting. He had a plan to counter it, but the fear was that sanctions could cause up to a 20-25% contraction of the economy, which means you'd have unemployment, you'd have internal unrest, etc. Now, if you mobilize, have a draft, that can also cause, remember Vietnam War, people resisted. So what he didn't want to do is create the conditions for internal unrest.
Okay.
Because many people in Russia hadn't bought into why he invaded. They're like, why did you go in?
Yeah.
Especially now, it didn't work. Now we have a war.
Yeah.
And so his army's moving, advancing, but then and he's destroying the Ukrainian army. Remember that 260,000 troops that were there? He killed about half of them.
Oh, wow.
In this part of the fighting. But the NATO,
the guys that tried to invade that area, he basically that he preemptively got rid of half of them. Okay.
So now, but NATO's rebuilding the Ukrainian army, and now Putin's got a problem. He has this long front, but he didn't have enough men. When we say 180,000, understand first of all, the frontage is, let's just say it's 1,000 kilometers. It's more than that, but that means 180 men per kilometer. But 180 men isn't right, because you have people. Not everybody's a frontline soldier. You only have 60,000 frontline soldiers.
Yeah,
that's 60 men per kilometer. But now that other places are going to have more. In some areas, you only had 30 to 40 men per kilometer. 30 to 40 men to defend a kilometer.
How much do you normally need?
So normally you need around 200, 300.
There you go. Okay.
All right. In depth. One line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense, reserves, all that.
Okay. So they're operating at like 20% of what they should be.
Right.
Yeah.
Thinly manned. So now this big new NATO army comes in and they shoot the gap. You have these guys thinly manned, they shoot the gap, they get into the rear, they push the Russians back. And the Russians opted, they did, rather than do what they call the hedgehog defense, which is dig in, get surrounded, fight, kill a lot of Ukrainians, but die. The Russians said, nope, everybody back, retreat, come to this river, dig in, create a new line of defense. And they did that. And they killed a lot of Ukrainians in the process. But this was the big, remember the Ukrainian big counteroffensive that took over Kharkov and then took over Kherson.
Yeah.
Everybody's going, oh, the Ukrainians are winning. The Ukrainians are winning. Not really. The Russians consolidated their defenses. And now Putin then
said,
it
was their mistake for coming in with not enough men, because they were hoping that that would get them to the table.
It was a huge mistake to come in with not enough men. But now Putin was liberated into mobilizing. And so now Putin orders the mobilization of 300,000 men. He then also, they get volunteers, about 150,000 other volunteers, and he starts expanding the military. And the bottom line is they went from 180,000 to about 450,000 right now is what they have.
Yeah.
And these guys are dug in, well-trained, well-equipped. The Russian economy is working. They're producing tanks. They're producing missiles. Everybody's saying the Russians are going to run out of ammunition. Russians will never run out of ammunition. Their defense industry is just churning it out.
Gotcha.
And so that's the army he's created. They destroyed that second army. The third army has been rebuilt. That's the one launching the counteroffensive now. It's being destroyed. This is the one we gave the Leopard 2 tank. Remember, the Leopard 2 was supposed to be the game-winning tank, game changer, modern Western technology.
Yeah.
They're all burning right now.
Oh, wow.
The Russians killed them that quick. The Russians have supremacy. Look, in the lead up to the Gulf War, one of my jobs was to plan the Marine combat breaching operation of Iraqi defensive lines.
Yeah.
And I did it using a supercomputer called the Janus computer. Long story short, I built the terrain map. I populated with the Iraqis, and then I populated with the Marines, and then with the computer, gave them different capabilities based upon, their training, their weaponry, and things of that nature. And then we'd run the simulation. And at first, the Iraqis killed all of us. So we kept gaming it, figuring out what we had to do to get the Marines to advance. And it came down to we had to have a lot of air power, blow the hell out of the Iraqis. We had to have a lot of artillery to suppress them. We had to have a lot of weapon systems suppressing them before we could advance in, breach the fields, move forward. The Ukrainians right now don't have any air power. How can you attack when you have no air power? The answer is you can't. The Ukrainians don't have sufficient artillery. How can you attack when you don't have that? They have no air defense, which means Russian helicopters have a field day on the battlefield. We're slaughtering the Ukrainians before they even get to the first line. The Russians are slaughtering the Ukrainians before they get to the first line of defense. They have no chance. This is murder, mass murder that's taking place today. And yet we continue to push the Ukrainians to attack. Why? Because, as I said, it's about East European manpower with NATO technology to bring pain.
But are they even bringing pain anymore?
Well, 1,300 dead Russians is pain.
Okay.
Imagine America taking that casualties.
Yeah.
Imagine in 2.5 months, we had 1,300 body bags coming home.
But is it worth the cost?
No, because Russia, again, remember,
Like,
I talk about my uncle staring down at me?
Yeah.
The Russians have 27 million people staring down at them, saying, never forget your history. You can't outpain a nation that suffered 27 million dead.
Yeah. No, I mean, as in, is it worth it for the Ukrainians because they're losing so, like, yeah, they killed 1,300 Russians, but for the cost of 350,000 Ukrainians?
No, of course it's not worth it for the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians have lost control of their destiny.
Yeah.
They're totally, and
the U.S. is 100%.
We are dictating everything.
Yeah. And why does the U.S. care? Because it's not our soldiers.
We want to bring down Russia. I mean, let's look what happened to Yevgeny Prigozhin. All right, Wagner Group. Wagner Group was created, we talked about in 2014.
Yeah.
In 2022, May 2022, they were given a $940 million contract from the Ministry of Defense to create a division-sized unit to help recapture the Donbass. Mm-hmm. At that time, Lugansk and Donetsk were independent territories, so legally Wagner could exist. Mm-hmm. In September, they held a referendum in those territories, Lugansk, Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and they annexed those territories. They became Russia. Mm-hmm. Now you have a legal problem because by law, a private military company can't exist on Russian soil. Wagner now became an illegal organization. But they had a contract with the Ministry of Defense for 1 year, and the Ministry of Defense said, we will honor that contract. Mm-hmm. But on 1 May, you have to become part of the Ministry of Defense. Prigozhin said no. He was making money. He said, this is my business. So Prigozhin began a PR campaign elevating the status of Wagner in the minds of the Russian people, how he made a movie called Best in Hell, a full-screen movie, propaganda winning the Russians over, telling them that we're the strongest warriors, we're the best warriors. Wagner's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But he's also saying that the Russians suck. The Russian leadership sucks. They're bad. We're the only good ones there are.
They're the ones that put him in power in the first place.
Yeah, he forgot that. So now the Russians are saying, no way we're renewing this contract.
Yeah.
So people, so when it ended, they pulled him out of Bakhmut. They sent him back to the barracks. They said, sign the contract or you're done. And he said, no, I'm going to instead march on Moscow and capture Shoigu and those guys and make them give me the contract.
What the hell?
Yeah, no, this was all about greed, pure greed. So he went on the road and Putin's like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm coming for Shoigu. And he said, no, this is treason. Now, people think that Prigozhin's a strong guy with Wagner. Let me tell you what happened. Putin put 2,500 Russian special forces outside of Serpukhov, which is a town south of Moscow, and they dug in. And when the lead Wagner elements came in, they were told, if you come one step more, we're going to kill you all. Mm-hmm. And to prove it, they brought in a helicopter and they blew up a car. Now, Wagner shot down a number of Russian helicopters, killed 12 Russian airmen. That's murder, by the way, because Wagner has no right to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Prigozhin's down in Rostov, 10,000 Chechen Akhmat fighters working for Russia surround the city and send the message into Prigozhin, you're going to die tonight. We're coming in. We're going to kill you. We're going to kill all of Wagner if you don't give up. Mm. So Wagner gave up.
Okay.
They came back. They disbanded. They no longer exist.
Chechens don't fuck around.
They don't fuck around.
Yeah.
I spent some time in Chechnya. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Still Muslim. Still Muslim. Is
Muslim. A Muslim majority country.
Majority.
Very, very Islamic. Very. I mean, they live according to the faith, but they live in peace and harmony with the Russian Orthodox. Yeah. When you go to Grozny, which has been totally rebuilt, it was the most destroyed city in the world in 2002. Today, it is this city. you almost think you're in Las Vegas. There's so many lights going on, and the beauty of it, mosques, churches. The Russians and the Chechens live in peace and harmony. Americans don't want to hear it because we always talk about, how bad Putin is. Putin is loved in Chechnya. Everywhere you go, his portrait is everywhere. They adore him. They also adore Akhmat Kadyrov, the father of Ramzan Kadyrov, the current president, because he made peace with Putin. And together they work to rebuild Chechnya. And today Chechnya is just this wonderful republic. I would encourage everybody, when all this war ends,
went out there.
to visit.
They went out there because they have a huge fighter community there.
Oh God, the MMA community out there is unreal.
Yeah, like there's some of the best MMA fighters come out of there.
I talked about the Ahmad Special Forces.
That's all they do.
That's all they do. I tell you.
No distractions, no booze, no women, just train, fight.
I went to their Spetsnaz Academy. Yeah, and got to watch them train, and then they gave me the honor of. I mean, this is a weird thing, but I was
in Dagestan.
No, in Chechnya.
Yeah, Chechnya. Yeah.
And I was. They assembled the presidential.
No, I'm saying and Dagestan.
Oh, and Dagestan. Yeah. They assembled the presidential guard, the Akhmat Special Forces, for me.
Oh wow!
And I got to inspect them and meet all their commanders, and all that stuff. It was just the weirdest moment of my life because I'm an American.
Yeah.
And I'm there, but they respect me as a Marine. They respect me as a warrior. They respect me as a man of honor and integrity. And so they did that. I have nothing but respect for these people. They and again, it's a beautiful.
And Chechnya is a part of Russia, right? It's like is it like a state? Would it be like a functional equivalent of like a Texas for us?
It's like Texas. It's a former. They call it a republic. Ramzan Kadyrov is the leader, but they are part of the Russian Federation. Yeah, and they're fighting today as part of the Russian Federation.
Yeah, they have Russian passports.
Oh yeah. They speak Russian. The whole deal. They are proud to be part of Russia too.
Yeah.
That's why they're in Ukraine. Yeah, Kadyrov was one of the first guys. He said, "No, we can't," because what Kadyrov knows what the CIA was doing with Chechnya back in the 1990s and early 2000s, trying to split Chechnya from Russia as part of the program to destroy Russia. He knows what happened. He's seen it before. He lived it, and he knows. If you work with Russia, look, you rebuilt this republic. It's so beautiful, so modern, so wonderful. You got to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
And so they see what the CIA is doing in Ukraine. They say, no, we're not going to let that happen. So they're actually going to Ukraine to save Ukraine from the CIA. Yeah. Because the Chechens know the truth.
Yeah. And they were definitely targeted because of their strong.
And they're all MMA fighters. I want to reiterate that every one of those Chechen special forces guys I met, they could kick my butt.
Yeah, of course. They're all fighters.
They're just studs. You're just looking at them going, wow, all you do is train.
Yeah, that's all they train. Dude, they train. They're religious. They don't do drugs. They don't drink alcohol. It's all forbidden in the Islamic.
They don't
religion.
womanize. All the things that Americans run around doing. Chasing women, drinking. And all this stuff.
They womanize. They got 2 or 3 wives,
Well,
which is fine.
There is that, but they're faithful to their wives.
Absolutely,
and they're family people. I mean, the family orientation is unreal, and they're the most loyal friends you could ever want. And they're also the worst enemy you could ever have.
Yeah.
They have in America we talk about the Hatfields and McCoys, the blood feuds. Chechens got blood feuds. If you cross their family the wrong way, they're going to get you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they have the religion on their side, so they're gonna go super hard. It's one thing to fight someone who's a paid mercenary, or whatever. It's another thing to fight someone who believes that they are there on God's will to fight you on God's will. You can't. It's different.
The only way
it's different.
The only way you beat that is to kill them, and even then you don't beat them. As I drove through Chechnya, you have the cemeteries.
Yeah.
And on certain graves, there were these sticks with a flag flying on it. And the meaning of this was that was a unavenged death. That he's in the ground, but the death has yet to be avenged. I mean, somebody's got to die.
Yeah, of course. That's crazy that they label it that way.
You're going 1, 2, 3. There's a whole bunch of unavenged deaths out there, man.
God damn. Mo, you had a question, right? Real quick, hit him with the question. It was something pretty good on language.
Yes, it did.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
I did.
Go ahead.
It was regards to Russia's growth. And And I was wondering, is this why there are an amount of extra countries in Eastern Europe and Asian countries being fluent in Russian language? Is that a result of the growth, or is it maybe the language learning from all these other countries being so fluent in Russian is a result of Russia's growing, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around. It's the spread of the Russian language is because of Russia occupied these territories for a while. I mean, after World War II, Russia occupied East Germany. They occupied Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, the whole thing. Also, the eastward expansion of Russia, into Tataria, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, going up to the Buryatia and Lake Baikal and elsewhere. So all these Muslim and Buddhist peoples learned to speak Russian as well.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'll say is that the Russians are very good at not assimilating, of peaceful coexistence.
Mm-hmm.
So in America, we sort of have this thing where we say, if you want to be an American, you got to become an American. You got to change.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians are like, no, we respect who you are.
Yeah.
Like with the Chechens.
Yeah.
They're not telling the Chechens you got to become Russian.
Yeah.
They're saying,
or become Christian or anything like
no,
that.
they're saying you are who you are. Kazan, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Kazan, in Russia. It's the capital of Tatarstan, Tataria, a predominantly Muslim territory. Again, beautiful, peaceful coexistence, orthodoxy coexisting next to Islam. No problems whatsoever.
Crime.
Well, not like America. I'm not going to say there's no crime. Of course, there's crime everywhere you go. But I'll tell you what, there wasn't a Russian city that I walked around in at night where I felt at risk.
Yeah.
Wow. That doesn't mean that I wasn't. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be a drunk guy. There couldn't be a criminal.
Of course.
It's everywhere. But I'm just telling you that the society there is very civil, very peaceful. And
what's your response? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what is your response to people that say that Russia is nothing more than a gas station, has the economy of Italy? That's a common criticism about Russia's world power capabilities, saying that they have dated military. They're not as advanced as people say. What's your response to that?
Well, let's just start with the concept of Russia as a gas station disguised as a nation. I think John McCain said that, and some other people said that too. Well, if you're going to say that, then don't be the Humvee on a super highway in the middle of nowhere that ran out of gas. Because the Russians know energy better than we do. That's why Europe sucks right now.
Yep.
Because they cut themselves off of Russian energy and they have no alternative. Cheap Russian gas. The Americans come in, they're friends, by the way, and we're charging them 5 to 7 times the amount of price for gas that the Russians were giving them. This is why the European economy is in collapse. So first of all, if you're going to mock them, make sure you keep perspective. Don't be the Humvee on the superhighway in the middle of nowhere that ran out of gas.
Yeah.
Because suddenly being a gas station looks pretty good. 2, there's a thing called, it's PPP, parity purchasing power, I think is the term. And what that means is, so in the United States, we tend to skew things to our benefit. We talk about gross national product.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's fine. So in America, I'm just going to be oversimplified here. $100 gross national product. Okay. And we go, and the Russians, they only make $10. Okay. That's fine, Scott. Go to the supermarket and buy a basket of food. Well, it's going to cost you $70. But in Russia, the same basket of food only going to cost you $3.12. Suddenly, that economy size doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah.
Because the purchasing power of the Russian economy is far greater than that. So when they say it's the economy the size of Italy, wrong. Russia can accomplish so much more with its economy because the cost of living isn't as high.
Inflation isn't through the roof.
No, 3% as opposed to 8%.
Yeah.
So you got to understand Russia's economy before you start making those things. That's the problem with people like John McCain. They don't well, he's dead now, so it doesn't matter. But Lindsey Graham and others, the people who say that just don't understand the reality of the Russian economy. They can't produce equipment. There was a video out. The newest Russian tank is the T-90 assault breaker tank. All the bells and whistles designed to beat NATO and everything. It did an attack on the Ukrainian lines, and there's a drone up there filming it. It got hit 19 times. 19 times by Ukrainian tank fire, RPG fire, anti-tank missile fire. 19 times.
Damn.
Still going.
Wow.
Leopard tank. That's the German tank. That wonderful. Comes in, gets hit with one Lancet drone, blows up and burns.
Wow.
The Russians have been preparing for a war with NATO now for over 20 years. Every piece of equipment they make has been designed to defeat NATO's equipment. What has NATO been doing for the last 20 years? Practicing to kill Afghan wedding parties and kicking down the doors of Iraqi villagers. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And we haven't been practicing to fight the Russians.
Yeah.
General Cavoli.
Is that why we're so excited to be engaged with them now through the proxy war of Ukraine?
Well, I mean, I think we might have been excited early on thinking we could win. But General Cavoli, the commander of U.S. forces in Europe today, Supreme Allied Commander, he spoke to a Swedish forum in January, defense forum, and he said, the scope and scale of the violence that's taking place in Ukraine today is beyond the imagination of NATO. Now, that's an important thing to say, because when you do a training thing, you're training to that which you can imagine. You're preparing for that which you are conceptualizing.
Yeah.
So if the scale of violence is beyond your imagination, it means you haven't trained for this.
Yep.
You're not equipped for this. You're not ready for this. And that's the fact. NATO cannot fight Russia today and win. That's a straight up statement of fact.
Bam. Okay. All right. It looks like we got an updated map here. So Mo's going to show it on screen here. Go ahead, Mo. You can pull it up. All right, go ahead. Is there anything that you wanted to point out specifically, Scott?
And thank you, Ryan Dawson, for this one.
Oh, Ryan Dawson said that? Okay.
Yes.
But I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is Crimea. This is what we call the land bridge. Kherson, Zaporizhia areas. This is Donetsk. This is Lugansk. You see the dotted line here is what the normal Republic of Donetsk is. The green part is what the Russians occupied. So the fighting today is roughly along this line here, coming down here. And what the Russians are trying to do today is just advance to capture the totality of these territories. That's all that Putin has talked about.
Okay, can you highlight that bottom right corner, Mo? That's basically what they're trying to capture there. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Scott?
This area here. They're just trying to
from Makiyivka all the way down to Kherson, right? Is that what you're?
No. The most of your fighting right now is taking right here from Zaporizhia.
Okay.
Up,
highlight that
in
area, Mo.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
that's where most of the fighting is going on right now.
Yeah, the Zaporizhia front is where the big counteroffensive is taking place, and then Donetsk is
to the right.
Is the other area. Yep.
Okay. All right. And where's the Donbass region that you were mentioning before, where they had soldiers set up and Putin had to preemptively invade?
Well, Donetsk is the capital of the Donetsk Republic, and Lugansk is the capital of Lugansk. Lugansk and Donetsk, these two republics, this is considered to be the Donbass right here.
Okay, so Mo, it's that entire region, like on the right corner, pretty much. You see on like that. Yeah, up a little bit bigger with the circle. Yeah, that like area right there. Bam, perfect. Yep, that's it, Mo. Yeah, that's the area that okay. So that's where Zelensky had about 250,000 soldiers staged, and Putin preemptively stopped them.
There was
planning for March, you said, right? And then Putin invaded.
There was a missile attack just the other day in a town called a city called Kramatorsk, I think it was. The restaurant that got hit, the pizzeria, and the video that's showing you got a bunch of mercenaries, a bunch of American, British, Canadian guys in uniform. They're trying to dig bodies out. And it was the staging area of the 56th Motorized Rifle Battalion. But that city, Kramatorsk, is the city that was the heart of the Ukrainian buildup to lead the attack into the Donbass. Yeah.
Question for you: what do you think, in your professional training experience, from what you've seen, understanding how war works and how we went through the entire history, guys. So make sure to check him out on Twitter. His links are all below, man. Literally an encyclopedia. You and Ryan Dawson are literally encyclopedias with this stuff. I learned so much. What do you predict is going to happen in the next 6 months to year with this conflict?
If the conflict continues, at this rate, the Ukrainian military is probably going to collapse sometime late summer, early fall. There's just no way Ukraine can continue this fight.
Of this summer, of this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, there's no guaranteed on that outcome because, again, I just point out that, even though the Ukrainians lost 13,000 dead, the Russians lost 1,300.
Yeah.
That's big pain.
It is, yeah.
I have a feeling, though, that the Russians aren't going to throttle down, that they will throttle up. And they also think the Russians understand that time is not their friend.
The Russians, you're saying time isn't friend for the Russians or the Ukrainians?
For the Russians. Because if they can't seal the deal on the defeat of the Ukrainian army, this war runs the risk of becoming what they call a frozen war. Like the Korean War with a demilitarized zone that will be a forever conflict, that will be a forever drain on Russia.
Okay.
Russia needs.
I thought Russia had time because they have the resources and the manpower and.
Well, I mean, Russia's a big country with resources, and right now they're super. But if the West ever gets its act together and starts mobilizing its defense industry so that it can perpetually supply Ukraine, and Ukraine shows a tolerance for casualties. Remember, Ukraine is a nation of 40 million people. There's more people to kill. There's a potential that you could exhaust Russia. Not that Russia would lose, but that Russia would eventually have to sue for peace because it can't sustain. So I think there's pressure on Russia to bring an end to this conflict sooner rather than later.
Okay.
But Russia's not going to do it in a way that generates high casualties.
Okay.
Russia doesn't want.
So that kind of okay.
Russia doesn't want to. No, high casualties on their part.
No, of course, that's what I mean. Yeah.
They want to kill as many Ukrainians as possible.
Yeah.
As long as they want to die, Russia's going to help them die.
Yeah.
But the Russians don't want to do it in a way that increases their casualties. So a lot of people are like, well, why aren't the Russians attacking? Why aren't they being aggressive? I just answered the question, guys. Because to be aggressive in the face of an enemy that can still mount, the Ukrainians, as much as they're dying, they're still lethal. They killed 1,300 Russians.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you see those videos on TV that, everybody searches that show the Ukrainians breaking into a Russian trench line and killing Russians. Yeah, that's war, guys. Just because the Russians.
There's video of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. On Twitter?
Twitter, Telegram.
Wow.
But the point is, war is hell.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way street. People are dying on both sides. It's just that more Ukrainians are dying than Russians. But this isn't like the Russians are just sitting back playing Call of Duty and killing and all that. This is bloody. This is horrible. This is horrific.
Let me ask you this. I think I know the answer to this, but for the people out there, right? Why hasn't Russia just airstrike them to fucking hell? And then done what we did with Iraq. Airstrike them to hell, have the ground troops come in, clean up. Why haven't they done that?
Well, they're going to. They're moving that direction. But here's the thing that people, again, Putin's talking points. You're a Putin puppet, Ritter. But if you scratch a Russian, you get a Ukrainian. If you scratch a Ukrainian, you get a Russian. These are both Slavic peoples. There's a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Russia. Every city has thousands of Ukrainians. Every Russian has a Ukrainian relative.
Yeah.
The Russian military, if you're a rank colonel and higher, you went to school with Ukrainian officers who were Soviet officers at the time.
Yeah.
These are your brothers.
Yep.
So the Russians are at war with themselves. I'll give you an example. It comes from the Wagner group fighting in Bakhmut. They surrounded a group of Ukrainian soldiers and they shouted out, "Brothers, surrender and you can live." These are Ukrainian soldiers. You know what the Ukrainian soldiers shouted back?
What?
Russians don't surrender. That's from World War II.
Wow.
That was a shout that a Russian soldier gave to the Germans when they said, "Surrender." He said, "Russians don't surrender." And he had a grenade and he blew himself up.
Wow. And
these guys fought to the death. These are Ukrainian soldiers fighting Russians, saying Russians don't surrender.
Wow.
We talk about how tough the Russians are. The Ukrainians are just as tough. They're the same people.
Yeah.
It's the same people, with the exception of these Western Ukrainian Nazis. The rest of Ukrainians are Russians.
Yeah. That's something that no one wants to admit, though.
They don't want to talk about.
They don't want to talk about that shit.
This is a civil war, and so the idea again.
I agree. It is a civil war. It's like, if we're going to give an American functional equivalent, it's like Florida fighting Texas.
Yeah. Well, worse. Florida fighting Georgia, where across the border you have families traveling together, or Alabama, where people vacation in Florida, you vacation in Mobile. Your cousin was from.
That's the functional equivalent for guys out here that might not understand, Eastern European politics and geopolitical situations. That's what the equivalent would be.
So this
crazy.
This is a tragedy. Putin said from the very beginning that he ordered his troops not to inflict unnecessary casualties on the Ukrainians, not to destroy Ukrainian infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If we went to war, if the United States had done this, Zelensky would be dead by now.
Yeah. We would have airstriked them to hell.
I already told you, one of my jobs in the Gulf War was to kill Saddam. Mm-hmm. All right. So we actively targeted him. I actively targeted him. Mm-hmm. And we blew the hell out of the Iraqi leadership. We also blew up their bridges. We blew up their infrastructure. Russia has taken a soft approach on this one.
Yeah. They want to capture it intact.
Well, they don't want to inflict harm because at some point in time, this war is going to end, and then their brothers have to learn to live in what's left. But the longer this war goes on, the more the Russians are starting to make the pain come down.
Yeah.
They are.
They have to pay for it at the end. The Russians will.
They understand
if they destroy everything.
They understand that. Yeah. If you burn down your brother's house, eventually you have to rebuild it.
Yeah.
So, but what the Russians now are doing is they are bringing in the air power. This is why Ukrainian casualties are going through the roof now, because the Russians are saying, okay, it's time that we end this.
I was telling people this from the beginning when they said that Russia's losing the war, whatever. I remember like a year ago, I was saying, like, you guys do realize that if Putin wanted to, he could have airstriked Ukraine to hell and they'd be gone in 24 hours. But, I don't know. People just, we have the propaganda machine with the news in the United States is so anti-Putin, it's ridiculous, where it's like people are delusional and completely unaware of what the hell is going on.
You hear this again, going back to Prigozhin and the coup that took place.
Yeah.
People are saying, well, Putin's weak because he didn't kill all the Wagner guys. And I'm like, Putin's strong because he didn't start a civil war. Putin's strong because he saved Russian lives. Putin's strong because he didn't promote Russian-on-Russian violence. Putin's strong because—
Which is what NATO wants.
Yes. But because Putin's strong, we have to tell lies about Putin and call him weak.
Yeah.
So when Putin comes in with a special military operation that's not designed to invade, to destroy, but to generate peace. Remember, I told you the purpose of it was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table.
Yeah.
We misinterpret that. We said he's weak.
Mm-hmm.
There ain't nothing weak about Putin, and there ain't nothing weak about Russia.
Let me ask you this, and this has been kind of contained in the U.S. media as well. Didn't they find biological weapons in Ukraine?
Well,
contrary to the Minsk agreements?
Well, the Minsk agreements had nothing to do with the biological. Let me put it this way.
Or agreements that we had in place before, where we said we would not encroach in Ukraine. Ukraine would not become a part of NATO. We wouldn't continue to encroach on Russia, and we wouldn't have biological weapons staged there.
Here's the deal.
Okay.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, they had the former Soviet republics had nuclear weapons programs, biological weapons programs, chemical weapons programs that we needed to bring under control. One of the biggest fears is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, their economies collapsed, and you have all these
surplus
scientists,
weapons.
Well, not just the weapons, but the scientists that know how to build the weapons.
Yeah.
And if they don't have a job, they're going to go someplace else and do it.
It's an enemy.
So we had we had a couple programs. We had one program which was built upon gathering the weapons and destroying them, but we had another program that was built upon creating employment opportunities. And in Ukraine, we signed agreements with the Ukrainian government where we came in and we took over the former biological weapons labs, and we cleaned them up. The idea was to clean them up, get rid of these the weapons, but then we had to create employment vehicles for the scientists, keep them employed.
Gotcha.
So we began things such as researching viruses, and that's normal. I mean, we do it. There's, right now in Florida, people are, the mosquitoes. We have people collecting the mosquitoes and looking at the mosquitoes to make sure they're not bringing in a new virus. We're trying to anticipate problems. And if they bring in something, then we have a lab that tries to create vaccines and all this stuff. So we have all this going. And that's how this started. This started with legitimate biological work. It's not biological warfare work, it's biological work.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happened is money. This is corruption. Money corrupts everything.
Yeah.
So we did this through contractors who received money, came up with an idea. Now they're trying to do other projects and they're getting shot down. But every time they came back in and said, let's build a biological lab, they got the money.
Mm-hmm.
So they started building these biological labs. But now you have the lab and you have to have work to do.
Yeah.
In America being America, we started expanding the envelope of what was in America. We contend that we can have that we don't have an offensive biological weapons program, even though we produce biological agent. But what we say is we're producing that biological agent for defensive purposes. Well, once you produce a biological agent, it doesn't matter. It's a biological agent. You can't have it. But because we're America, we say, well, we know what our intent is. We know we're not we're in violation of the Biological Toxin Weapons Convention. That's 100% guaranteed. What we did in Ukraine is a violation of the treaty of that. Our arrogance gets in the way. We don't admit that we're violating because we pretend. But the fact is, we were producing agent that was genetically modified only to attack Russians. We were considering vectors that would send them from Ukraine into Russia to spread these diseases. Now, we'll say there was only theoretical modeling, that it was just part of our overall thing. But if you're the Russians looking at this, you're saying you're preparing to launch a biological warfare attack on us. You're preparing for biological war. And the Russians are right. They're right to be concerned about that. So what we as Americans should be doing is demanding from Congress an investigation. We should be demanding that
because didn't they bring this to the UN a couple months back?
And the U.S. wouldn't let it be discussed.
Wow.
We shut it down.
Yeah.
The Russians have all the documents.
Yeah.
They're not making anything up. They
showed
have
the treaty with Zelensky signing it. There's irrefutable proof at this point.
So if I were Congress, I would turn to the Department of Defense and say, are these documents true? I want the originals. We have to investigate this. Let's get to the bottom of this. But they're not doing it because to get to the bottom of it would be very embarrassing for the United States.
Damn. All right. I think I definitely want to talk about, I'll read these chats, and then guys, we're going to switch on over to Rumble because I want to talk about some more sensitive topics that we definitely can't talk about here on YouTube, the stuff that we discussed before.
And like the video.
Yeah, and guys, do me a favor, like the video. We got over 10,000 y'all watching, by the way. We got like 5,000, almost 6,000 y'all here on YouTube, and then we got like another
6,000 on
6K
Rumble.
on Rumble. So we're gonna move over to Rumble here very shortly, guys, because I got some questions I want to ask and some discussions that include why the Western media hates Putin so much, which I have a theory on that, which I can't talk about on YouTube. Why we're gonna talk about the Trump situation with obviously the classified documents and his foreign policy, because I definitely want to talk about why we went to war with Russia with Biden in office versus not Trump in office. And I think there's some things we want to talk about that as well. So DJ Cogdill goes, Court Marshal Mark Milley, Ryan Dawson. Who's Mark Milley?
He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Okay. And shout out to Ryan Dawson, by the way, man, the fucking homie. Ryan Dawson actually is who put us together, man. So shout out to Ryan Dawson. I'm going to have him on tomorrow. We're going to talk about 9/11.
There you go.
Yeah.
Talk about getting banned.
Yeah. We do that one on Rumble.
Thank you again, Ryan, for the map.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for the map, man. Shout out to Ryan Dawson, guys. Travon Suki goes, Professor Ritter, this proxy war just sounds like sending lambs to the slaughter. So is West's goal just to slow down Russia in its growth? The Russians are making smart global moves by investing in African countries and extracting resources.
Yeah, well, the West's goal is to destroy Russia.
Yeah.
And Russia is winning because their goal is to not just survive, but thrive. And look what he's saying. The Russians are out there thriving. The world.
Can you talk real quick about some of the steps that Russia took preemptively back in 2014 when they first faced the sanctions to prepare themselves for 2022?
Well,
I know buying gold was a big thing.
Again, I'm not a gold. When I say I'm not a gold guy, it means I'm not smart enough to understand gold. If I was, I'd be rich. And but the Russians understand gold. They understand the value of gold, and the Russians have spent a lot of time trying to reduce their debt load, buy gold, get sufficient gold reserves, et cetera. So they basically turn their economy into an economy that could survive a shock from the United States if the United States tried to separate it from the global economy. The Russians were well positioned to survive the sanctions. They were better positioned. Look, Putin himself was surprised. He expected a 20% contraction in the Russian economy, and he got a 3% contraction.
Wow.
And today, the Russian economy is growing.
And the ruble's been going up, so you can't dispute that their economy hasn't gotten better.
No, trust me, I was just there. Their economy's doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Thank you, Travon. Good question. Rams goes, talk about BRICS agreement and the possible effect in the near future. Okay, we'll talk about that on Rumble. And then we got here come on, $50, scratching the bottom of the barrel on this one. Conspiracies on everything. Everything is conspiracy. The flat earthers next.
So I think that's critical of us.
Okay, I guess so. Scratching the bottom of the bottle on this one.
So I'm the bottom of the barrel.
I guess so.
That's okay.
Yeah, haters gonna hate, man. I mean, I'm still yet to see anyone come up with a convincing argument for a lot of the things you've said here. All the people that say that you're a Putin puppet. All right, so guys, come on over to Rumble. Let's throw it in the chat, Mo, real quick. Can you tell the people, just for the YouTube guys, we're gonna go to Rumble right now. So come on over to Rumble, rumble.com/FredSpick, because I got some stuff here that's more sensitive that I want to talk about. That definitely ain't going to be safe for YouTube. Where can people find you real quick before we go over to the Rumble audience?
The best way to get me is on scottritterextra.com.
Link is below.
That's a one-shop stop. There's no paywall, so you can get there. You everything I write is available. Any podcast I do that is linked is available. If you want to subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. But like I said, there's no paywall. I'm on Twitter at real Scott Ritter, and I just got back on. I was banned for a number of months by Elon Musk, but that he lifted the ban. So thank you, Elon.
What did they take you down for?
Well, the one time they took me, I was taken down. 3 strikes, you're out in Twitterdom. The first time I got taken out because I allegedly dead named somebody. Chelsea, well, that's a term, I guess, for transgendered if you use their old name.
Yeah.
And Chelsea Manning is somebody who has transitioned, I guess. But back when Chelsea was Bradley Manning, documents were filed related to the allegations of espionage, etc. But the documents were filed as Bradley Manning. So I made a reference to the legal document only in the context of the time because but I was accused of dead naming. So they banned me that. The second time was for the Bucha massacre north of Kiev, the suburb, where we'll
talk about that on Rumble.
Ukrainians. Okay, well, the Ukrainians. Yeah. The bottom line is, I sent out a tweet that said Ukraine did it, so I was banned.
Yeah.
And then the third time, I appeared on the Alex Jones show, and just simply by appearing on the Alex Jones show, I was banned.
Oh my God.
So
okay.